August 16th meeting of the Lake Forest City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Honorable James Cowhey.
Here.
Alderman Grumhaus.
Here.
Alderman Novit.
Here.
Alderman Widman.
Here.
Alderman Moore is absent. Alderman Morsch.
Here.
Alderman Hanrahan.
Here.
Alderman Looby.
Here.
Alderman Palmer.
Here.
8 present, 1 absent. Mr. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Thank you. You please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first item on the agenda this evening is reports of city officers, the first being comments by mayor, and I do have two items there. The first, I'm sad to report, is a resolution of sympathy for Ron Shlifka, who is the owner of Kiddles. As you may have heard, that Ron was tragically killed in a car accident last week. And I'd like to read this resolution for Ron and his family. Whereas on behalf of the City of Lake Forest, the City Council expresses its sadness at the profound loss of Ron Shlifka on August 11, 2010. And whereas Ron Shlifka has been the owner of Kiddles since 1968, where he was known for treating his customers like family with respect and kindness, and whereas Ron Shlifka was known as a family man and a well-regarded business owner who truly cared about his community and fellow residents. His contributions to Lake Forest were significant, and he will truly be missed. Now therefore, be it resolved by the City Council that its deepest sympathy goes out to Ron, Ron's wife Mildred, his son Jay, and the rest of the Shlifka family. I'd ask for a motion to approve the resolution.
So
this evening.
moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. The next item on the agenda this evening, I'd like to make some comments regarding one of the items that will come up later in our report. There will be a report by the Housing Trust and Alderman Morsch, who will speak to a recent housing survey. And I have some comments in that regard in the next meetings that will be coming up probably for the remainder of this year. Throughout the course of our recent discussions about the Settlers Green Affordable Housing Project, a number of important questions have arisen, both from our community and from our council members. Therefore, over the course of our next few meetings, I'd like to review our current affordable housing policies and ordinances. I think we need to have a thorough review and clear understanding of these policies and update them if necessary before we consider any specific project in our community. We need to discuss the recent downturn in the economy and its effects on our community, how best to meet the needs of an aging population, and review other variables to ensure we are making the best decisions for Lake Forest. In September, we will review the Affordable Housing Plan and policy updates that have resulted from the Joint Council Housing Trust meeting that was held last November, and continue our community dialogue. Tonight, as I mentioned earlier, Alderman Morsch, the chairman of the Housing Trust, Michael Burns, will present information about our affordable housing parameters in general and specific data from a recent housing survey. Those conclude my comments this evening. The next item on the agenda is comments by City Manager. Bob?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I have a few items under my agenda this evening. First item is actually an exciting one, and I don't think in my 20 years I've ever seen so much excitement by the community around a store opening up as we have with the new Fresh Market. And here with us this evening is Dave Meadows, the construction manager for Fresh Market, and if I could ask him to please come forward.
Gentlemen, how you doing tonight? Just wanted to express our gratitude for being part of your community. It's been a wonderful project for all of us, and just want to express our gratitude to a lot of the folks within your community and the city organization for their help and just cooperation and helping to get us open. I know several names and individuals who are just instrumental in that, so very much appreciated, and we are very glad to be here. I think the store opened with a bang last week. Parade and everything else going on, so it was a great timing for us. Store's doing well, and we hope you guys are excited about us being here, as excited as we are to be here. It was I know way back when that store was just a thought on a napkin, and how are we going to fit a grocery store into a bowling alley, as we call it. It was a long process to get to where we are now, but it's always, especially for me, very rewarding to see that end product and just look around the community and think, man, this is a great place to be. So just very excited. I don't know if you guys know much about Fresh Market, but started in Greensboro, North Carolina. We're almost 100 strong now, and as we grow and get bigger, places like Lake Forest are just great to be in, and just really, really excited to be here. So the store manager, Kyle, would welcome anyone to introduce themselves to him. He's, I think he'll be a great fit for you guys. We like to think that our stores are kind of meeting centers for the city, and we kind of become a big part of, or a little part of, sometimes bigger places of where we fit in, and people kind of meet and greet there. And stores open 9 to 9, 10 to 9 on Sundays, 10 to 7. I may have that wrong. But it's I think you'll find the staff and the overall store receptive to comments and input from the community. And as we grow with you guys, help us to help us to fit into your community and provide what you guys need. So that's kind of what we're all about. So don't know what else to say, but that's we're just very glad to be open, and I look forward to being part of your community. So thank you very much, and we look forward to working with you guys going down the road. So
Welcome to Lake Forest, and I've visited your store in Wilmette many times, and I know I'll be in this one many more times.
So you're familiar with Wilmette
I
then?
am.
Okay, great. Yeah, so similar application. I think if you've seen that store, this store is just beautiful. I mean, that store has its own charm, but I think the architecture of the building we fit into is just really a nice touch. So glad to hear that.
And good food, too.
And that too. So I have a certain point of view sometimes, but yeah, thanks again, and look forward to being here. So thank you, gentlemen.
And Dave, just make sure that everybody back in your home office understands that we actually threw a parade for you on your grand opening too, so.
Well, that's exactly what we told everybody, and we're actually putting those in our leases now to get that parade every time we open.
That's right,
it.
if Lake Forest does it, everybody should do it.
Exactly, so we're gonna call it the Lake Forest precedent. So yeah, but that was great, so good timing.
That's right.
Thanks
Well,
again.
welcome. Very quickly, in front of you should be calendars. Susan Banks has asked that I remind you to get those back. We're going to try and look for dates to have a town hall meeting in the fall, so if you could please let us know dates that you are out of town and not available. It probably is the easiest to figure out what would be a good date. And I think this year we're going to have your town hall meeting at the Gorton Community Center. And so if you could get those back to Susan as quickly as you possibly can, that would be helpful. Okay. Also wanted to report on two other things. Quick updates. As you know, Western Avenue is completed in terms of the paving. They will be doing the pavement markings on Wednesday, starting Wednesday, August 18th. And also there is going to be some saw cutting of the pavements where they're going to be installing the granite pavers at the crosswalk, and so that will be going on over the next couple of weeks as well. That will all be done before they're going to start the on Green Bay Road, the removal of the pavement surface next Monday, August 23rd, and that will proceed accordingly, but hopefully there will be no disruption on Western Avenue that will allow that to be a good auxiliary route for people.
When do we expect to have Green Bay done? We've obviously got 3 schools on it. that are starting pretty shortly.
I'm guessing that it is probably from the time that they start grinding, it's about a 2 to 3 week process. It's pretty
How did we get so backed up on that? I know we had the strike, but before the strike, we were ready to go, and then the strike came, and the strike ended, and then nothing happened for 3 weeks.
Right, because you basically have one contractor doing all these projects, and now they're doing them in a compressed period of time. So, and remember, this is part of the state ARA, or county ARRA project, so they're doing, I think, 20 projects simultaneously throughout the county. So, we'll keep on them, but unfortunately, we also told them to not move too quickly so that we could get Western Avenue done, and we didn't want both of them under construction at the same time. So,
Because obviously the 3 schools are gonna be impacted.
yep. Now, we'll try and move them. They're aware of that, but unfortunately, that was one of the outcomes of the strike that was going on. The other thing is with, I've got this afternoon, I don't think, is Ralph? I don't see Ralph Gesualdo in the audience. Is he hiding back there? Some of you, I think, know that Ralph is chairing up the Forest Park Committee, and he wanted me to pass on to the council and the community this evening that they are still working diligently to try and get people on their board. They are making a concerted effort not to just take Friends of Forest Park or Garden Club people and really reach out into the community. They have gotten, I think, a chairman for the Historic Preservation, PR Marketing, Landscape, Horticulture, and Engineering Technology, or Technical Committee, but there's 2 other committees, Memorials, Amenities, and Finance Fundraising, that the chairs are not yet confirmed. But they have approximately 10 plus people on each of these committees, and I think they're hoping to have these finalized by the end of August, when everybody's back in town from their vacation. So my guess is that you're going to see a lot more activity from the Forest Park Committee starting in the fall of this year. And I would encourage anybody that has any interest to please contact them and let them know of their interest, and see if we can get them on one of the upcoming committees.
Just for the sake, real fast, who would they contact? Because I've gotten a fair amount of emails that I can't direct to the website, just for volunteers. And should they go to Ralph or?
They will. I'll send out to you Ralph's email address, and then you can forward that on to them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me, but I can get that out to you.
Thanks.
And go from there. Sorry, got a lot on the agenda here. Let me move to the podium. Karina, I'm going to need some help here. Actually, my name is Bob Kiley. I live at 652 Timber Lane, and I'm not here as city manager. As I've tried to emphasize to everybody I have contact with, that my volunteering to help out in the Gorton situation is me as an individual, not as city manager, although I do have a lot of friends in high places here in the city. But most importantly, make it clear to the community and to everybody that I do not come with the city's deep pockets, and that this is an issue that requires involvement of the community to correct this situation, and not just a bailout from City Hall. Let me begin with maybe a short story. The night that the Gorton board agreed to appoint me as interim executive director of Gorton, I had dinner with my daughter at a local Chinese restaurant. And so I was telling her about the fact that now I had 2 jobs, not just one in the city here. And we were talking about what was going on in Gorton. And at the end, when you get your fortune cookies and you open them up, this was my fortune cookie. And my daughter immediately said to me, "Dad, that's Gorton." And I have to agree with her, because The nice thing about this situation, that since I've been involved with it now about 2.5 to 3 weeks, is that while Gorton may be impaired, it is not broken. And it can be fixed, it can be turned around, it, I think, can be born in a bigger way to take us into the future about what the importance of Gorton as a community center is for the city of Lake Forest. I think importantly that what we have been really focused on over the course of the last 2.5 weeks are 3 things. Number 1 is to get the, oh boy, I'm going to need you, Karina, try and zoom that in, if you will. And I know the council has received a copy of this in their packet, but one of the first important actions was to get the new transition board in place. And as I indicated to, I know members of the city council and members of the community, that the transition board you'll see is a much smaller board than traditionally what Gorton has been operated by. But going into this, there was a sense that we needed to have a very focused, smaller group. Oop, you're missing a few people. You're going to need to widen that out because there's 9 people there. That these are individuals that have different skills, different qualifications, different experiences, that they can come together. And I promised them all that this would be a 90 to 120 day tour of duty, but that we would get in there quickly, assess the situation, and make recommendations, and then turn this over to a permanent executive director and a permanent Gorton board going forward. George Pandaleone was kind enough with a little arm twisting to agree to be chairman of this board. I think many of you know George from his time with the Plan Commission and other activities within the city. Many of the other names up there you'll recognize from people who have been involved either with Gorton directly or indirectly with other activities within the city of Lake Forest. Alderman Looby has agreed to come back, if you will, since he's been involved with Gorton. I think since it was probably established, you were about 10 years old at the time when it was done. But as you can see, it's, I think, a great transition team that can really help get in there, analyze what needs to be corrected. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on where you sit, is that while Gorton is not broken, there clearly needs to be changes. And these are not unlike changes that private or governmental agencies are going through right now with the tremendous problems that we're having in the economy and drop in fundraising and a lot of other issues that have impacted getting Gorton in the position that they're in. So we're looking to possibly have our first meeting August 30th. We're looking to have meetings on the 2nd and 4th Mondays of the month. And right now we're scheduled 2 a month so that we can get at it and start to turn this thing around as quickly as we possibly can. The second important action step was really to get a control on the finances. And you know, anytime you have to lay off all the employees and effectively almost close the doors, if you will, there are problems there. And I'm happy to say that through trimming of some expenses and some fundraising activities that took place over the course of the last 10 days, that we are in a position that we're going to be able to pay off all of our bills within the next 2 weeks and at least be whole to all the creditors that we have owed money to for a period of time. And we felt that that was very important to try and clean the books, if you will, and to make everybody whole for anybody who's either taken a program or a canceled program and they're due a refund check or vendors or what have you, and try and get that turned around very quickly. Also, I was very clear with everyone up front as well that we were going to bring in some outside eyes, if you will, to take a look at the books. And we have engaged on a part-time basis the auditing firm of Lauterbach and Ammann to come in and to help us clean up the books, to sort through the finances, get a better handle as to where the revenues are, where the expenses are, and where we stand, And I'm happy to say that after a couple of days that, while there's still a lot of work to be done, that she's feeling pretty good about sort of the financial situation that we're at, and we should be able to provide some good reports to the transition board when it holds its first meeting at the end of this month. And finally, I think the third important activity that we've been involved with is really keeping Gorton Community Center alive within the community. Importantly, we've tried to keep the doors open, lights on, the phones answered, with minimal support staff and a lot of volunteers. And a big shout out goes out to Alderman Novit's better half, Nancy Novit, who said that she didn't have anything better to do than harassing her husband, and could I use her help at Gorton. And so it's probably worked out well for both me and for Alderman Novit, keeping her busy, but she's been a tremendous help. Just being there on a day-to-day basis, because I do have this other part-time job that takes up a lot of my time. And she, and as well as some other volunteers, have really helped out keeping that going. And we're trying to the extent that we possibly can, keep many of the familiar activities that have been going on in Gorton for so long and that people are familiar with, like the drop-in center and so forth, going forward. But again, the message has been clear, is that it isn't business as usual. If it didn't work financially before, then we've got to change that. And with respect to the drop-in center, if you saw any of the notices, we've set a goal as to how many minimum memberships we're going to need to have if we're going to go forward. They've raised their rates. They've done some other things. We'll be looking at the expenses to see if we can bring the expenses down. And those will be the kinds of things that we'll be looking at, a number of activities real quickly to, again, keep the doors open, keep the lights on, keep people invested in the Gorton Community Center while we work through this transition period, with a goal towards January 1 of 2011, being able to turn this over to a permanent board. We can all then retire from our jobs, and hopefully then Gorton's in a much better position going forward from there. So I'll be happy to answer any questions the council might have. I know that we're in a different place tonight than we were 3 weeks ago when we set this emergency council meeting tonight in terms of a briefing, but I am here to say that I think that while it's unfortunate the situation that we're in right now, it is fixable, and I think it can be fixed in a very short period of time. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be some tough decisions. There will be some pain. There will be some sorrow. There will be some tears. But our goal is to develop a sustainable model for going forward, and making sure that Gorton can continue to thrive for the next 50, 100 years as it has since its inception. So I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody might have about anything. Other than good luck, huh? Okay.
I would like to thank you, though, Bob, for all your hard work and efforts, and certainly George, Alderman Looby, and all the board members that have stepped forward, and certainly all the past board members that helped in this transition. It was certainly not it was an unfortunate situation, but I think, as Bob just explained, it's been a very positive one, and I think it's a testament to Lake Forest that in a very short period of time, you've seen how quickly we were able to right the ship and get it back to where it's smooth sailing again. So, again, thank you for all your efforts, and thank everyone in the community that stepped up and helped out. And I think we're all very confident that it's in a good place, and it's going to prosper and do well.
I certainly hope so. And I apologize, I didn't see George. He snuck in. Would you like to make any comments?
Mr. Kiley, while George is stepping up, just be sure to keep our city manager informed, will you?
I'll try.
Thanks, Bob. Bob made a reference to arm twisting. It wasn't very much arm twisting. As a matter of fact, I don't think there was really any. I was actually honored to get that call. And it's a great institution. It's a prototype for a lot of other things that the city has done over the years. And you know, I'm looking forward to the challenge. I think the good news is Bob's going to actually do all the blocking and tackling, and we're just going to be able to sort of strategize, I hope, because that's, I think, what really needs to be done. And my thinking is we go back to square one and say, what is this? What can it be? where are the needs, where's the competition, where are the gaps that can be filled here, and come up with something that's financially sustainable and continues to have the support of the community. I really haven't been very involved in the city government for the last 4 or 5 years. I have had people stopping me on the street, thanking me for taking on this delightful opportunity. And so, I think there's a lot of community support to be had, and we just need to tap into that energy, and this thing can be repositioned pretty quickly. So that's what we'll try to do. And I think it's a great group of people. I mean, I think if this group can't do it, then, well, there's no question this group can do it. So it will just be interested in seeing how things evolve. And I'm definitely watching the clock from now to the end of the year, and going to keep Bob to his word on that. So, but thank you, and we'll welcome your input, obviously. And Bob touched on this. One of the first things we decided to do was to have a series of interviews with all the outgoing board members and other people to just make sure we don't lose any good ideas, because sometimes in an organization with that big a board, there are really good ideas that are already on the table that just never quite got the hearing or what have you. So we'll kind of go back to that first and make sure we don't miss anything in the transition. So,
Good plan.
any questions from the council?
No.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
And that completes my report for this evening.
I did get a quick advertisement in. Friends of Gorton did have a benefit at Laurel Grill. I went, it was wonderful to see the enthusiasm of the people that came out at this point in time. And my understanding is they're planning or hoping to have another dinner in September at a location that will be announced. And hopefully we'll see a crowd that is enthusiastic and is successful. But that's coming up in September.
Alderman Novit, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things it's actually been very pleasant, but also another challenge is the fact that there has been this outpouring of what can we do to help Gorton. And I think one of the things that we have to be able to do is, a lot of people say, I'm willing to give, but they need that long-range plan and they know what they're giving to. And so the other thing we also want to make sure doesn't happen is, in the fundraising business, you don't want to get someone contribute $100 when you really want $1,000 out of them. And so there's a couple of events that have been discussed, and what we want to make sure is that they're not competing with one another. And that's where there will be, over the course of the next couple of weeks, when somebody gets back from taking her daughter to college, that we'll be setting up meetings with the various groups to make sure that there's coordination in those efforts.
Well, she'll be back. She did get a speeding ticket, but I think in Mississippi, but she should be released pretty soon.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bob, and thank you, George, for stepping up, and thanks for all your hard work and efforts in this regard, and I know you'll be a great success. So, thanks again. Do you have anything else on your comments, Bob?
Nope, that completes it.
That concludes comments by the city manager. The next item on the agenda this evening is council committee reports. The first one being the Finance Committee, Alderman Grumhaus.
Nothing to report.
All right, that's quick. About the second one, I know we have here, we have the Housing Trust, Alderman Morsch.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you gave a good introduction. Today, we're here to talk about the results of a recent survey that was done by the city with respect to affordable housing. Before I start, I think, with the Housing Trust, and Mike Burns is here, who's the chairman out there, and I'm a member, as well as former Alderman Haddad. We have, for a number of years now, been focusing on affordable housing in Lake Forest. We've had a couple of attempts to come back in front of City Council to give status reports about affordable housing, about the activities that we're up to. I think that it's safe to say, at least from my perspective, I don't think that we've got a real clarity of direction, and there's a number of different maybe points of view. And so part of today is to, I think as the mayor aptly said, is let's take a look at kind of the factors that are driving affordable housing need in our town. Let's talk about them, and then figure out what next steps might come out of our discussion tonight, which we could then bring back to the Housing Trust and let them mull them over and come back with possible recommendations to City Council. So the first slide up here is kind of the pieces of the puzzle. Bob, I put this one in there for you. You like that, don't you? Bob likes puzzle slides, so we gave him a puzzle. And I would say over the course of the discussion on affordable housing, I know I'm one that says that our community has been built on affordable housing. I use my own neighborhood as a great example of a neighborhood that was built back at the turn of the century. That's the West Park neighborhood, where it was really built to provide affordable housing for shopkeepers, for people that work for some of the bigger houses here in town. So my view is that affordable housing has been going on for 100 years or more in the city of Lake Forest, and in fact, it is one of the great hallmarks of our community that we have always been able to have affordable housing. That has ensured that we've had a diverse housing stock as well as a diverse population. But the building blocks here that we've kind of talked about over time is first the need for affordable housing. Over the course of the past 10 years or so, City Council has established a variety of affordable housing policies. We'll take a look at those quickly. The next thing is that it's all of our job to make sure that as time goes on that we review and update our policies as changes occur and as city councils occur. And in fact, I think the mayor, you laid it out well tonight. Now's a good time to maybe review and update before we look at any specific projects. And then the last box is really to approve specific projects when and if those projects come up. So we're really here today we're not here today to talk about, we're here to, I guess, to review the survey results that we did to try and help context the possible policy changes to our affordable housing policy. Very briefly tonight, I was going to go through a history of what City Council has done to date on affordable housing, some additional factors that have been considered by the trust as we mull over what potential activities and actions that we can take relative to addressing council's policy decisions. Next, the survey as I discussed, and then I'd like to really get input and thoughts from council members individually on the topic so we can come away with some maybe action items and next steps. I gave a little bit of this, but if you look at this map, it talks about how affordable housing is really, we really have a dearth of affordable housing in Lake Forest. That's happened over a period of time back around the turn of the century. You can see my favorite neighborhood that I live in there, West Park, where a lot of affordable housing existed. And then over the years, there'd always been a focus on affordable housing, both for seniors and for young families actually moving in. And you could see back in the 40s and 50s, various subdivisions began to be built. They were built with 4-bedroom homes for young families to come back. Children who had moved away, who'd gone to college, come back into town and wanted to be near their families. So these were pretty typical trends throughout, not just Lake Forest, but throughout a lot of other communities on the North Shore. And then as we've gotten today through the housing boom of the 80s and 90s, housing became unaffordable for a great deal of not only citizens that lived in Lake Forest, but people desiring to move in here. It became very, very hard. And the council in the early 80s began to address the topic by focusing on seniors who were finding fewer and fewer places to live. And as council knows, we did some senior housing project back at that point in time to begin to address that need. The work that the Housing Trust done is we based that, the next slide is great. We've really been driven on a very fact-based basis for, and these were I think many of the facts that helped drive City Council to begin with to start dealing with this issue. But in terms of houses within Lake Forest that would qualify for affordability, Back in the 2000 census, and these are incomes between $35,000 and $75,000 per year for a household. It'd be 17% of the households in Lake Forest. There was another survey done in 2006 and 7, and that basically reconfirmed that number at 15%. And subsequently, and we'll talk about this a little bit further tonight, but the survey that we just recently completed indicates, basically reconfirms those numbers with the numbers there suggested that both senior and non-senior households, that there's over 20% of the households in Lake Forest that would qualify for affordable housing of various kinds. In terms of, next slide there, in terms of the history of what City Council has done with respect to affordable housing, as I indicated, it started back in 2003, and at that point, I was a member of the Plan Commission. I remember that we took up the topic when then Mayor Preschlag wanted to introduce the topic. It was, as many people may recall, there was a discussion, there was a statewide law back at that point which mandated affordable housing in communities, and Lake Forest decided that they would do two things. One, they decided that they would move forward in the spirit and deal with the issue of affordable housing, because as I showed you on the census figures, there was a real need within town. Certainly, we were hearing a lot of the need from the senior community about affordable housing, but it also moved forward on home rule. At that time, I think there are some people that would probably indicate that one of the reasons or one of the logics behind home rule was the ability to customize a potential housing program for Lake Forest instead of having a mandated state program placed on Lake Forest. That was back in 2003. In 2004, there was a whole list of surplus property or property not being utilized by the city, and a number of those properties were identified as potential locations for affordable housing. There was then a plan adopted in 2005. The first ordinance passed in 2005 under Mayor Rummel, who is here. Hello, Mayor Rummel. And then subsequent to that, we looked at some additional tools like a demolition tax. A demolition tax allows that a certain portion of houses that are being demolished goes into the into a housing trust fund dedicated to invest in affordable housing projects. After that, there was a ordinance establishing actually a housing trust. That housing trust was modeled off of housing trusts that exists in a number of communities around the country. The one nearby, there's a housing trust in Highland Park that has been fairly successful. There's also a number in California, in San Francisco Bay Area that have been very successful, where there are large companies and a lot of employer efforts to develop housing trusts. Communities have set up trusts that actually are entities that can be ultimately non-for-profits, but can hold funds and can make investments in affordable housing projects. As I indicated, the board was established back then. I was fortunate enough to be asked to be on that board, as well as Chairman Burns, who's here, and former Alderman Haddad. In 2008, after a series of meetings, the council supported a resolution for interjurisdictional cooperation on affordable housing, meaning that there are a number of communities around us, including Highland Park, Deerfield, Northfield, and Highwood, that are all facing very similar issues, and we, at the time, council felt that it was important that affordable housing projects did not always have to be in Lake Forest in order to serve the needs of Lake Forest residents. So that ordinance was passed for us to do regional cooperation, meaning that governments could get together and build projects together, leveraging one another's resources, or in things like that, and potentially even leveraging staff so that each town wouldn't have to have its own staff to do these kinds of activities. Subsequent to that, there was a program that was started by the Illinois Housing Development Authority, which the city became aware of, where we could apply for tax credits, which would be a way to really jumpstart a potential project with taking the benefit of federal tax credits that would not otherwise be available. That project was approved by council back in 2009, and that just gives you kind of a background and history of the types of activities that council's been involved in. Additional factors, a couple other things that I just wanted to highlight in terms of, and you may all know this, but the Housing Trust, we've had so many different meetings and so many people come before the Housing Trust. But one of the main drivers of, at least from what the Housing Trust hears about, is that it's not just Lake Forest residents, it's people that are employed in our community. And just some statistics, our employment base has increased from, you see, nearly 11,000 to 14,500 employees just in a 5-year period. So we really, that's a lot of good news, is that we are a very attractive place for people to work. And we're part of what the Housing Trust tries to think about is we're a very attractive place to work, but we also should be an attractive place, an affordable place to live. So we try to match that together. It's something that we think about a lot. We're kind of today as a check back in with City Council on that topic. The other thing that we hear a lot, and these are big institutions, and I put 2 of them up there that are, these are 2 institutions that have been with our community, certainly Lake Forest College for all the years that the city has been here, but also Lake Forest Hospital. These are very large employers. They're very important, and affordable housing has been a critical component of where they see their ability to recruit and maintain quality workforce. And so we hear from them a lot, and they've spoken up on that. We also hear from all the other corporations. Many of the corporations, whether it be Pactiv or Tenneco or Trustmark or TAP Pharmaceuticals, these corporations have clearly within their charters, affordable housing is a very critical component of their corporate culture and something that's important as they retain employees. The other thing that we look at a lot is the changing demographics, and that is that we've seen a lot of single head of household families. We're seeing a lot of younger families that want to be here in town or stay in town or want to come and be near their parents to maybe take care of their parents or their elderly family members. So those are all kind of trends that we see a lot of. Getting to the survey, we conducted the survey between May and July. It targeted 3 groups: residents, seniors living in Lake Forest, residents who are non-seniors, and then employees working in Lake Forest and residing elsewhere. We wanted to do that because I think that most of the discussion early about affordable housing in Lake Forest was driven by the need in the senior community. So we're introducing, I guess, a couple other data points here for you to consider, and whether or not we ought to, how we ought to consider those is really up for discussion in council as we go forward here. We got a tremendous amount of respondents to the survey, over 1,200. As you can see there, 27% of those were residents and 73% of them were employees. A couple of highlights. You did all get in your packet the detailed survey reports. Rather than go through that all, I'd rather get us to the discussion point. Just a couple of highlights about the survey and what it told us. This is senior residents, and one of the things we asked them about is why they would have to move. And they thought they'd move because and a lot of the seniors said they're going to be moving in the next 3 to 5 years. And they'd be moving because of either downsizing, the cost of maintaining their home, state and local tax, or the cost of health care. 52% of those that were surveyed would prefer to remain in Lake Forest, but were uncertain about the ability to find affordable housing. Next slide. I'm just going to kind of do the highlights here real quickly for everybody. Non-senior residents, reasons to move, job-related. I'm going to get a new job. I'm getting transferred. The cost of maintaining their current homes. Again, the burden of state and local taxes and downsizing. 42% of those would like to remain in Lake Forest, and they're uncertain again about the ability to find affordable housing. In terms of employees, and you saw a large group of the survey respondents were employees, probably about 800 out of the nearly 1,300 responses were from employees. 98% of the employees that were surveyed currently drive, and they drive alone to work. And most of those, I believe, oh, here it is, it's 30 to 54% of those were 30 to 60 minutes away from work. So it really did confirm all the statistics that, at least the assumptions, the working assumptions that we'd been working on. And that is that it's become that the second largest expense in a family's house has actually gone from housing to, it's now, well, the first is housing and the second is transportation. And we're seeing that, so that's directly coming out of people's pocketbooks. It directly goes into the cost of our employees and their ability to retain and maintain a good workforce. So I guess the point, at this point, we've gone through some data, we've gone through some city council actions to date, and I really want to open it up for city council to talk about any questions about the data, or maybe any things that we've potentially overlooked, or other factors that we should consider as we, before we talk about should we review our policies. Maybe we missed something, or maybe we wanted to present with you kind of the background of what we're kind of acting on, and for your thoughts and consideration.
What was the amount, it's not mentioned in here as affordable housing. I mean, you had some pretty good sized salaries listed in this survey that said
Right.
affordable housing, so.
What is the definition of affordable housing?
Okay. Why don't you, Megan, can you pull up that slide, please? We knew you'd ask that.
Always.
So we want to have all your answers. These are the affordable housing income ranges
Okay, and is that
under the
based,
definition of affordable
and is that
housing.
based on a county, a city, a state?
This is based on a region,
And how big is that region? Do you have any
all
idea?
Chicago metropolitan region.
It's the standard metropolitan service area.
Okay, so
Right.
we can't just use Lake Forest's income and use a percentage of AMI of that.
We've based this on what the state affordable housing legislation says. That's based on the SMSA, not on the individual community or county. The original version of the statute was based on a county level. That was then changed.
Okay.
I mean, one person at 63,000 can buy a nice place out at Amberley Woods, and I don't know if I'd call that particularly low-end affordable. It's pretty nice. So
As far as the cost of homes for affordable housing, is that this chart on tab 4? Where a one bedroom for $159,000, or a two bedroom for $178,000? Or at the 120% moderate income, that's the 238?
These are the income levels, and typically, I mean, the general rule of thumb on income versus housing is 30% of income available for housing. That's the general rule of thumb. That as you look at these numbers, here's some more charts, there we go. Guess I shouldn't have taken them out. Okay.
So I guess one.
Here's the affordability charts, which is your question.
Mhm.
So with those income levels that you saw on the previous page, here's the house that they could afford to buy. So, John, to your question, the first one, if in fact there's a condominium available between 140 and 211,000.
Crystal Point, or I don't mean Crystal Point, but across the street,
Right.
1301.
But
What is the
so
affordability based on? I mean, what kind of down payment, what kind of mortgage payment?
It's based on, I think the analysis here is simply based on 30%.
So
It's not at that
When was-
granular level.
When was this done?
This was just completed now.
Based on data from, what, 2010?
No, this is based on the, as Vic indicated, it is based on the definition of affordability.
As the Department of Housing and Urban Development
Right.
actually established.
So when I look at your survey, it looks like then that for senior and non-senior resident responses, about 70% of the survey takers wouldn't qualify.
Right.
Right. Because they make more than 80,000. And it looks like then, on the employees, about 54% wouldn't qualify. That to me seems the biggest, thing that we gotta discuss and figure out.
Well, I think that, I think the census data suggests about the same thing. Yeah, I don't think there's a discussion about that 80% of the people in Lake Forest need affordable housing. I think the discussion is that we've had confirmation of about 20%. So that would hold true that 20% of respondents in a survey might need it as well. I think the survey suggests that more than 20% of the people that responded to the survey, but that would be normal since it was a survey based on affordable housing.
Okay.
I mean,
If
it
you
wasn't
look- If you look into the actual definitions of income in the census, because you could have somebody who has made $1 million or $2 and is taking it out of savings, and the withdrawals are not counted as income. There are big things, and I think particularly for Lake Forest, if there's somebody who's the beneficiary of a trust that is distributing. What struck me when I looked at the census data is we had 53 households below the poverty line that were homeowners. And the poverty line, is really low. I don't see how you could afford to even pay the taxes on some of these. So I then looked at the definitions, and when you say that, you've got to look into it, because it doesn't say, well, that's all they've got. People could have a lot more assets.
Okay. Fair point. I certainly, in the Housing Trust, we didn't take it upon ourselves to look into the assumptions of the U.S. survey.
Based on the chart that was up there before with the home values based on the 30% of income available to pay for them, do we know through assessed values or anything what percentage of the real estate in Lake Forest is currently affordable? I looked in here, I know I'm new to this because I started in May and this is last year's work, but I couldn't find, the homes, the 4-person households, or how many homes in Lake Forest are appraised for between $140,000 and $301,000.
Hold on a sec, we have a chart.
I know you have a chart. We did that at one point last year. We did that work.
Apologize for
No,
revisiting.
not at all. Not at all. That's the purpose of the meeting today, is to try
And how far away are we, and what's the goal? Because
Right.
that's what I was kind of looking at here. How many do we need?
last year, when Chairman Burns came before the city council, we had that entire discussion. Here's the total housing units. And we, at the time, put forth a goal of adding an additional 80 units was what we recommended the gap to be, even though the gap is more than that. We
Are those
thought
numbers
that-
different now with the economy where it is, or?
Yeah, it is hard to say.
It's going up hourly.
We have not, if you're asking, did we do that in the last couple of months to reflect the current real estate market, the answer is no. We haven't done that work, and we could certainly look at it.
I think the expectation was that we would, from new projects and from growth in the housing stock, we would get new units. And obviously, we're not having any growth in the housing stock at this point. So
Right.
those units that we thought we would naturally build, we haven't gotten, which obviously puts the impetus on us, if we want to do this, that we're going to have, more designated
Right.
standalone projects.
If you look at those numbers, and maybe Alderman Moore try and answer your question. When we did the work last year, under the state kind of guidelines, it'd be 10% would be the goal. And if you look at 10%, that's 740 affordable units. And we have about 400, a little less than 400. So based on that data, it was discussed at council that we're not gonna have a goal to do 400 more affordable units in town. We did not think that that was achievable, but we did think that a goal of 80 was a reasonable goal based on the number of discussions that we have, the number of potential projects in the pipeline. We've been talking over time with the hospital, with the college and others about joint projects with them. We brought before city council perhaps something at Dickinson. We've had, a number of, when Barrow was a project, there were affordable units in that, and those have not moved forward because of that development. So there's been a number in the pipeline that we thought that 80 was a realistic goal over the next 10 years. That was,
And then a definition clarification. That's not the number of houses for sale in Lake Forest.
no, that's total housing units.
Okay,
And how many of them are affordable?
okay, it said for sale in the heading there.
Right.
Okay.
And Tim, backing up, and
Yep.
this is before the economy changed drastically. The numbers that we see for houses that are 300,000 and under, that number from charts that had been shown before, it's a shrinking number. There's a number of tear downs in the community, expanded homes. How fast has that stock been shrinking? We could add 80 units and then lose 80 units if the economy was stronger. So again, we're not
I'm sure some of
frozen.
those factors have happened. I think, maybe for council's benefit, the Housing Trust could certainly go back and update this to reflect based on the current economic conditions. I think that if we did update it, I think you're gonna still find a gap, though. I think that's probably a fair statement, so.
I wasn't suggesting, I was just,
No, but I think, it's a really good question, and I think one that we should be considering, and I think that's something we probably ought to take a look at here. Other kind of thoughts and questions on this generally?
It seems to me, when you were looking at, you showing up the history of how much affordable housing we had in the 20s to the 70s, we're talking about single-family homes. And you had the federal government giving all sorts of financial incentives to allow people to become homeowners. You had VA loans, you had tax deductibility of mortgage interest, you had Freddie and Fannie, who are now insolvent. But there was a real push to have people buy homes, and we developed a community mainly of single-family residences. And what we're talking about now, as far as I can tell, is rental. And the things that people can afford are rental. We're not going to buy and resell homes, I hope. We've been trying to find things that people can manage to rent. I mean, the Settlers Green project is a rental project. And I think the question really is this really just a situation of how Lake Forest has developed, that we've never had much rental housing? Is that the real issue here?
That's, I think broadly speaking, the Housing Trust has looked at all sorts of alternatives, and I don't think it's, I think we're kind of looking for council to help us as we go forward, that if rental versus for sale is an issue, then we should focus on, and that's one that we'll take back and come back to you with some recommendations on.
I was just, I was surprised here that, when you look at employees, the response was they want a single-family house and they want to buy it. That's really what, when you're in that age group and the group of people that are there, it was surprising to see the numbers. They're not interested in rentals, and they want a garage, and they want America household in a house.
Yeah, I was not surprised by that. I think if I had to answer the survey, that's how I'd answer the survey too. It's what you want versus what you can afford is what we're here talking about, and
Well, and what
that's
you're willing
part
to
of
trade off, right?
But-
I mean, you can drive 30
They're
or 40
willing to
minutes
drive
away.
that far
And
to
there
get,
are,
Exactly right.
there
to
are a
get the
lot of
American
housing
dream.
developments, a lot of communities where you can get a house with a garage, under the affordable definition. So,
That's correct.
I mean, that's the question mark.
Right.
And is that changing? I mean, obviously, we know we're overhoused in this country, right? Typical homeownership was 60%. We pushed up the envelope through Freddie and Fannie and all this other stuff, and just above 70. And everyone's saying we gotta go back to 60, you know, that it's not realistic. So, you know, the desire for everyone to own a home is maybe, you know, pulling back here. But, you know, I think that is I think that question we gotta figure out, because if generally what we are talking about is rental, and I know the Housing Trust has talked about both, but we've got to make sure that that's an appealing product to the audience that we're trying to the people that we're trying to reach out to.
Right. And I guess that's the purpose of tonight, is to really hear from you and get your thoughts and ideas in that, and nail it down, because I think that the Housing Trust needs to, you know, we need to follow your lead. We're not trying to lead here. We're trying to make sure that we're taking your thoughts and ideas on this topic, and then coming back to you with recommendations that are lined up with your thoughts and your ideas. In trying to give you the context here, I tried to give you a sense of what had driven city council actions today. And we had a program that was based on, I think it's safe to say, primarily targeted at seniors initially. And if you look at our inclusionary housing ordinance, it talks first to seniors. And so I think the question, a clear question to hear everybody's thoughts on is in fact that where we should remain, or should we broaden that to consider other non-senior populations within the community, or within people that are employed in the community. What I've tried to bring back to you today is a couple of things. One, a survey that confirms there are a great deal of need out there. There's additional input that we've gotten over the past 3 or 4 years directly from employers, very large employers in our community, and I called out 2 of them, the college and the hospital, which are very important in our community, that have said affordable housing is critical to them to recruit and maintain their workforce. So to the extent that that is an important topic to you, then that is something that we can also try and fold that into, that objective into our activities as we go forward. So that's what we're here tonight for, is to really hear from you about that.
Tom, could you give a little more insight into how the survey came up with, where you get 75% of the respondents being non-residents? I mean, how did we get to
To get it
that?
with their paychecks, and
I mean,
you know, they really zeroed in. I think the return is unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, as I indicated when I talked about the survey, we did target employees, and it was easy to target them because all the companies were very interested in this topic and made sure that the survey got widely distributed. We then published it on the website for residents, and certainly the senior community was well aware of it, and you know, so we were very happy with the level of response. It was a very good response to the survey that was done. So we tried to broaden it to as many as we could. There just happens to be a lot of employees that responded. I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just a fact. That's what we're trying to bring back to you, is the facts here, so you can help guide us policy-wise here.
I assume these employees include city and school?
Yes, they did. And one of the, if you look on, I highlighted a couple of quick facts, if I didn't have all these slides in front of me today. But if you go to the survey on page, I mean, to that very question, if you go to page, I'm sorry,
13, maybe.
somewhere in there, it's in the middle, 13, but it talks about the respondents and the companies that they're coming from. 13, where is that? Somebody help. 8 of 29, if you look on page 8 of 29, this gives you the activities, and if you look at the survey respondents, I mean, it really confirms exactly what we've been hearing, and that's why I'm trying to bring back, I guess, empirical data, so it's not just my opinion here. You know, we've heard from people that are at schools and hospitals that they have a real need for affordable housing. And that's a population that we had not targeted in our original, in City Council's original affordable housing ordinances. It targeted, as I indicated, primarily seniors. But we have heard a lot subsequent to that from the college, from really all the schools. I've had numerous conversations with Harry Griffith about this, and from the academy, from the day school, all the institutions are finding, educational institutions have an issue with attracting quality teachers and keeping them in our community. A number of people at the college does a mortgage support program, but they don't have affordable housing here in the city, so they give mortgages support for people that might live in Evanston or even in the city of Chicago and commute up here. So, anybody who would go to, our train stations in the morning, you would see, and I'm sure you've all witnessed this, but we've had a huge increase in the number of people that are now coming to Lake Forest to work here and to be part of our community. And I think it's all a very good thing. But with that, I think begs the question: should we consider a broader kind of approach in our affordable housing than simply targeted to seniors, which I think is critically important and should be a continued focus for our activities, which they are.
Have you considered looking at, again, being new to this, I apologize, might have been covered already, but, New York City's got rent control, Aspen, Colorado has off-market housing. They've got limited geographic area, so the city owns houses, sells it, they're allowed to get a cost of living increase every year, so the houses stay well below the market price, and they're sold to a waiting list of families who move in and move on to buying houses. And, the ideas that, we don't have the issues that led to those ideas here in Lake Forest. We don't have a valley or a large rental pool or something like that. But some of those ideas may find,
I think those ideas have merit, and I think other council members have brought those up. Should we be acquiring individual homes? Those are all different tactics that we could come back to you with alternatives on. I think we've had people appear before the Housing Trust that are people who've developed land in Vale where housing got outpriced. They could not attract the employees to operate the ski slopes or anything else, and they had to build a whole community, Eagle Vale, to support simply to support the community going forward.
and developers in those towns have to build employee housing as part of their projects. And
Right, and those are, as we do additional developments here in town, we do, the affordable housing ordinance does require that they either pay a payment in kind or develop affordable units. And that was the case in Vera. They were gonna develop affordable units with that project, so. So I posed a couple of questions. Does anybody have thoughts on those questions?
Tom, I'd like it to expand a little more, not to overlook the seniors, but in my opinion would be is to also be inclusive of employees of the city and in businesses around. I think the data supports it. I do get a lot of people that say, when I use examples of growing up here, that I grew up here and the people I knew, the teachers, I saw them during the summer, they lived here, that taught at the high school and in Deer Path, and my kids don't see the same teachers around town. I think it's something that's really missing, and but then I get shot down in public by saying, well, do you know what the teachers make? And they wouldn't fall in this category. So I guess it's maybe more of the first year, second year teachers, not necessarily the teachers that have been there for a while. So I mean, that's just one example, but I've seen a lot of my friends' families move out because they can't afford to stay in their hometown, and whatever we can do, I would be in support of.
And from Senior Resource and Senior Board, there is a need or a cry for senior housing on the affordable level. Also, though, it's I think healthy for the community if we could target at least entry-level homes to get people maybe who are working in the community to move up, because there are no entry-level homes anymore at this point. So maybe ownership of homes on a lower level would be a tremendously healthy thing for the community, going beyond employees, going beyond seniors.
One of the interesting, that's a good comment, and one of the other interesting things I saw in the survey was that in fact, in terms of the seniors, that there was a great desire to have not just a senior project, but affordable housing that was integrated within another development, so it wouldn't be just a senior building, for example.
Avoid the economic segregation.
Yeah, that there was a desire, and we had, at the Housing Trust, we had a number of presentations from we've had a lot of input from the Senior Resource Commission, obviously, and Marge Berta comes to every one of the Housing Trust meetings, but there was a real feeling of wanting to be, not in just a senior housing project, but a more mixed-age project would be better, frankly.
But
That's what the survey said here.
And it is a continuing focus for the right project, that's a want and need.
And, I would agree with what Alderman Hanrahan said, that, I think the seniors still is the number one focus, but, we do want to look at employees. I think nonprofit employees, educational employees rank much higher on the list to me than private employees. I do struggle with the income, though, question, because, when we think of the hospital, it's not the doctors and the nurses that we're attracting, because a lot of them are going to price themselves out. It's not the teachers that we're attracting. You're really going for more the support staff and people of that nature. And it's important to have those institutions, obviously, all those institutions need those types of employees. But you don't have your teacher or the policeman growing up next to you, right? They're not going to qualify. And so, that makes it a difficult question to ask. I think with the businesses too, you've got to ask the question, what are they bringing to the community? They're not bringing taxes to the community. They're bringing taxes to the state, but I don't think we get much of anything from the businesses. Certainly we're not from the nonprofits. They're bringing services, so then you're trying to look at institutions that are most impacting the services of the citizens. And again, that would take me back more to, teachers and, city employees and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I mean, and it should in fact, and Bob, I think, certainly the Housing Trust has the ability to come back with recommendations on how we move up that income spectrum for the activities that we do. One of the things that the Housing Trust has talked about a lot is that we should really be leveraging our dollars so that, if we can make one of our dollar be leveraged by 10 by a program that is out there for affordable housing, that we really ought to be looking at those very strongly and very close. And I think that's what led to Council's decision back in 2009 to take a look at the tax credits at the Illinois Housing Development Authority. It was a way to leverage, okay? If in fact we were to try and develop, we could develop all kinds of different programs if we wanted to start looking at different income levels. Vic, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have some flexibility to go anywhere from 60% of median income to 120% of median income in designing an affordable housing program. And, those numbers get to be fairly high salaries. You pick up a lot more people, I guarantee you. I think that we found that there's a huge need already, that if we're gonna even expand to more, we're gonna have to really be careful about how we make investments.
I was just gonna say, as we talk about adding new housing stock, and having affordable housing, one of the things I hear is that, we need more starter homes. So maybe the homes are, if you're building Barra, you've got to have another number of homes that are priced between $200,000 and $300,000. They wouldn't qualify as affordable, but again, we're setting the number there, and maybe that's the type of housing stock that we need to try and increase.
That starter home that, we hear the college gives mortgage assistance, those people could afford to purchase in and buy in to move up. And that's what we have to be careful of, that we work on that end, or our children can afford to buy a house back in this, town and move back. It's those young families that we're missing because they don't have that first step in a home to get into.
Right.
Even though
So-
two incomes may be
Yeah.
making 80 or 90,000, it's still tough for them
Right.
to get started.
So you think targeting, would that be then family members or
No, I think
would
it's
it be
just
targeting, would
it's a
it be
bank
targeting?
of starter, and a lower price home to buy into. I mean, looking through these, people overall, whether they were seniors or whether they were employees that, and I assume they're looking for a long-term position here in the community in their jobs, are looking to buy in. That's what they kept saying, the percentages to buy in to a house rather than just putting the money into rent. And they want to be part of the community, not just temporarily living here as a renter.
Right. So that would mean maybe targeting a group other than just seniors. I'm just trying to, I'm
Well, it
trying
would
to
be-
get a
It
handle
would
on
be good
the-
for both.
on who you want to target. Would you target any family that's a young family that wanted to move into Lake Forest, or would you target first a family whose parents are here or a relative? That's
I'd
the
probably
part, I
target
guess
that,
I'm
but
trying to get some
I
But
don't
I'd
know
clarity.
where
also-
to draw that line.
I'd
on
also
that.
probably target people who are working in the schools or, the police officer or the,
I thought
young-
I got your point, which I think
Okay.
was great, which was non-for-profit, educational, or public sector. So that gives me, that's good input.
It's-
And I'm
it's
hearing
the-
John
it's the
suggest.
Yeah, well, I'm agreeing with that it's that starter priced home, that we need some of those, more of those in the community, which used to be in those areas of purple.
Okay.
but I don't know how you maintain the prices, You can certainly designate the first house that, tell the developer, you've got to build some of these and, this is the maximum price level. But then I don't know how, without the affordable housing designation,
They can add on.
when they go sell it, you don't see that house
Well,
jump
that
up.
happens I've had friends that have lived in these homes in the mountains, and there's a waiting list for the homes. They're sold at affordable levels. They're allowed to appreciate 3% per year. They get their money.
But if they're not affordable to start with, can you slap those types of requirements on them?
No,
I don't know.
These are.
The answer is yes.
Oh, you can, okay.
Yeah, we've looked at that pretty extensively.
Yeah, and at least
In
in
terms of if
And they
we
stay
were to-
affordable, even if the market value.
There's some
I didn't-
towns too where there's a recapture on sale within 10 years, so you're giving money back to the affordable housing
Yeah,
program.
we did that we looked at that entire topic, and that's how the Vera, some of the Vera units would have been designed. They would have had a control on it effectively.
Tom, let me make a comment. I think in one of our ordinances, I'm not sure which one it was, we allowed a developer to make a payment in lieu of actually constructing a unit on-site that would be affordable housing. With the diminishing amount of real estate that we have, my concern is that the money that we might be accumulating via payments in lieu is going to be there, and we may not have as much opportunity to use it for this project. And so maybe we need to also, as a complementary thing, go back and take a fresh look at the ordinance and perhaps put some limits on how much of a payment in lieu there can be. In other words, to try to increase the number of units that are on site in a development, so we know that they will be there, and it takes the burden off of the city to find a place to use that money to get a place that the developer could actually build.
And a perfect example of that, Stu, is when I was on Plan Commission with the Lake Forest place. That's exactly what they did, is they put up the cash instead of building units on there.
Right.
Which would have been perfect, but.
Yeah, it almost makes it maybe almost too easy for the developer and shifts the burden and makes it a lot harder for us to
Right.
meet our goals.
Right.
Well, one of the things that we did, that's a great point, and one of the things that we've considered, I know we've talked about, but have not brought back a recommendation to council, would be frankly to increase the in lieu fee. Right now, it's about $140,000, I think, or $130,000 a unit. So you can, in fact, if you're a developer building a project, you can pay that money and put it into the trust fund in lieu of building a unit. And right to your point, the way to discourage that is either to put an absolute, put a minimum number, and we could come back with some recommendations after looking at this. A minimum number of units
Right.
have to actually be built on the site,
Right.
or both. Come back and say the fee will be higher if you do that, because it is harder.
Absolutely.
It's obviously harder for us to do it because we aren't creating very many yet.
Have we looked at all with, our existing monies in the trust, that, we have a number of houses that are been priced down across the community, whether it's new developments or just otherwise, at taking some of those?
Yeah, we have looked at that. I don't think, I think the leverage issue has come in on that topic, but perhaps we should do some more work on that, given where the real estate market is. I think that, together with Alderman Moore's question about, let's update some of these numbers based, and I think I've heard that from a number of council members, is let's update and see what's really affordable and what the pricing is in today's environment.
Right.
So I think that maybe that would go hand in hand with that in a way to see if we can leverage the dollars that we have in trust. If there's a way to leverage it so that we can get a good number of units for the dollars that we have. I think we've been very concerned, and I'll let Chairman Burns certainly, he's probably more eloquent talking about that, but I think we've been very concerned about trying to make very wise investments that are consistent with where City Council is and what the policy is, and also make sure that we're trying to leverage those dollars, because if we spend them, they're gonna be gone. And we've got a big job to do, and we don't feel, we have less than $1 million. It's not like we're rolling in the money to build units all over town, so.
Right,
I think
the
we've
dilemma
been
we have-
trying to be good stewards with the dollars.
Right, and going back to Alderman Woodman's point is, unfortunately, after we got the inclusionary zoning ordinance in place, which allowed for the collection of these dollars or the construction of these new units, things dried up. And so the only dollars we actually have is from Lake Forest Place, and I think it's in the $800,000 to $900,000 range. Unfortunately, we had anticipated Barra moving forward, which it did not. We anticipated Laurel Avenue moving forward, which it has not. And so we're sitting here right now, and somebody made the comment earlier on, is that if we had been in a much more favorable housing market, we probably would be well down the road in terms of the units that we've got. But as we step back now, we don't know if it's going to be a year, 3 years, or 5 years down the road before this happens. So that's something I know that Alderman Morsch and Chairman Burns and Debbie Haddad have been talking about at the Housing Trust is, what if we don't get another nickel under the inclusionary zoning ordinance for another 5 to 10 years? Then what do? How do we advance the mission of our plan with the limited dollars that we have at our disposal right now?
It's certainly not our view, that the Housing Trust view, that we're closing the gap here. We're not building units, and we're not closing the gap, and it's not our view. We're not hearing less from employers, we're hearing more from employers, so our view is not that the need has gone away. I think that our goal to talk to you tonight is really to get your thoughts and ideas. We want to be aligned with what the City Council wants in terms of policy, so that we're not wasting our time, frankly, going off and doing things that aren't consistent with where you want to go. And that's the objective.
Are there dotted lines from your area here to zoning to protect to not let the little houses become giant houses and lose our starter homes?
There are no dotted lines within. The
is
Housing
that
Trust is operating to execute the City Council's policy with respect to affordable housing. That's our charter, not broader than that.
Okay, but
We'll
are we
leave the rest-
losing houses to that?
Well, I think, Alderman Moore, let me just jump in here. Megan, can you put the slide back up that shows the value of owner-occupied housing up there? And I think this is an issue, and quite candidly, staff had some preliminary conversations with Bob Shaw when he was looking at Bear about this, because, and it goes back to the discussion, and we can get you data, Alderman Palmer, with respect to rental units. What's really happened over the last 20, 30 years is really we had much more of a balance in our community of low, moderate, and high income housing. And really what we have seen through both, if you go back and you take a look at everything that's been built between you know, probably mid-1970s and to today, it's all at the upper end, with the exception of maybe some condos and some other homes that we've done recently, or new type of developments we've done recently. We've lost rentals because they went to office. We had a lot more rental units before. Again, all of this was market driven. That's what the market was demanding, and we didn't have controls in place. And so this imbalance occurred. I think if you talk to any real estate agent today, they would love to see more of a balance, because I can assure you, and you've seen all the information that we've seen, is that the stuff that's up in roughly the 85% of our housing market, that ain't moving. And they would love to have something closer down, you know, $500,000 less, but if you look at it, it's roughly only 16% of our housing stock. And if you take a look at the home sales that we've had, with few exceptions, that tends to be where the primary activity is. And so to go back to, I think, some of the questions that were asked earlier, is can we do something to try and, either through zoning or other controls, to try and bring that balance back into effect? And I think that's going to be our challenge. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to have to be something that we try to address gradually over a period of time, and bring this balance back into place for our community. And then you can have the school teachers and the people that could be in this, you know, $200,000 to $350,000 range, but there really isn't a lot of product out there. And when something becomes available, it moves quick. It moves very quick. So I just throw that out there, because that's, I think, what I'm hearing the conversation on is, and I guess I would also emphasize, I apologize for jumping around here, is when you're talking about affordable housing, and I think this came out in the survey, there is not one size fits all. There's a lot of different components within there. You have seniors who want to buy, you have seniors who want to rent, you have seniors who want to be on east side, west side, you have first-time home buyers, you know, your children want to move back into the community, or you need to bring your parent to the community. So if you look at the need for affordable housing, there is a real myriad of needs and interests and so forth. And that's why I think when we look at our policies, we have to be sensitive to the fact that we don't come up with one product and say, okay, now we're done. Because, and we learned this even with the senior cottage. There was actually people who were eligible going to the senior cottage program that says, I don't want to move from the east side to the west side. That was it. So there was no way of convincing them to go over there. They were willing to stay wherever they were in the east side, just because that's where they wanted to be. And so as we look at these policies and we look at these trends, those are the kinds of things that the Housing Trust is going to have to be struggling with and challenged with as we go forward.
Bob, you bring up a good point. I'm going to ask Tom here again, is on the educational side of it, when you did the survey, was there more demand on the school district 67 and 115, or is it on the college level? I'm trying to understand the individual that's looking for that housing, because I'm looking at, for my oldest son who's graduated from college and moved on, and all of his friends are in Lake Forest. The first thing they want to do is get out of Lake Forest and move to Wrigleyville or move to Lincoln Park. And they'll take the reverse commute, which I think they're nuts, and drive all the way back to Lake County to go to work. But yet they'd want to get to where, obviously, where my words, where the action is, where the rest of the, you know, that age group is at. So I'm trying to figure out what, in the educational side, is there a more stable population on the college level where those teachers are staying here, or is it the other level?
I think they want that, but then when they turn 29 and 30 and start getting married.
Well, sure, when they want to raise it,
Then they're back
but
up.
now
Then
they're
they're-
back beyond the income level again. I think that we're trying to target again, that
Well,
would
but not if
fit
they're,
that affordable
not if they're a
housing.
teacher or a assistant college I mean, you know, that's the question mark, is how do you,
Yeah,
or a policeman, or, you know.
Yeah, I can just go back to the survey results. 40% of the people were with educational. I don't think we have a breakdown between whether it was 115 or 67 versus
curious
the
how that-
college. I'm not sure if we have that breakdown. I don't think we do. I think we just asked educational. And, I mean, I can tell you, it's more than anecdotal, because we've spent a lot of time with all the educational institutions, and they've expressed a need, and there's a need across the board. And some of them might be more teacher's assistant types as opposed to teachers. Some of them might be clerical people that work in the schools as well. But if you look at District 115 and 67, I don't know how they rank in terms of employees or employers in the town, but they're right up there. So, and so is the high school, or so is the college, and so is the hospital. So I think,
Yeah,
you
but
know,
I'm
that
not-
it's normal that they would be responding. They're our biggest employers. So,
You know, there's so many questions here that we can't really quite answer all because there's just all kinds of different possibilities. I don't know, I'm getting the sense that the council recognizes that there is a need. The survey indicates there is a need. I think there is a need. Not only do I think it's a need, I think it's the right thing to do. I think we decided it was the right thing to do, you know, 5, 10 years ago, whenever. And maybe now's the time to, because things are slow, to take this fresh look. And I think you've done a wonderful job of framing everything and giving us the information, and go back and start working on some of those specifics.
yeah, I think what I'd love as a takeaway, if I could be so bold as to ask you all, is that I think we need your direction. And I think what I've come in here and suggested is that originally, when council first tackled this, it was a very senior-focused program. And I think what data is in front of me, at least, and is that there's a broader need than just seniors. And I'm hearing from council that do not forget the seniors. That's what I'm hearing from you. That's very important to all of us, I think, have said that. But perhaps take a look at some other groups. And I'm hearing John say, you know, starter homes, and I tried to ask if that was of residents or of non-residents, because those are the kind, when the housing trust needs to make your policy operational, we've got to come back to you with some concrete recommendations and say, we think we heard you, here's what we got, what do you think?
Smaller homes, so seniors could go in or new
Right.
families. That's what I'm looking at.
Okay.
I mean, again, you know, I talked about nonprofits, and, you know, I would encourage you to, and I know you've done this, but think outside the box. I mean, you know, are there developments out there that have homes that are selling for $200,000 or something that we could subsidize and say, you know, approach 67 or approach some of the other schools and say, you know, we have a limited amount of trust money and we will create, you know, affordable homes here, and if someone wants to put an application in as a teacher here, and you know, we'll make this a permanent affordable housing, and, you know, we'll subsidize a part of their purchase price. Now, you know, I don't know if you can do that, but that's the type of stuff, you know, I think the market's given us an opportunity here, and, you know, I would be trying to think outside the box of things we could do to,
And I think that's.
you know, and take it to the senior center. You know, it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be
Yeah,
there.
it could be either or, because I'm pretty sure that's how the college works in their program, is that, you know, they have some housing on campus that they subsidize, and then they try to help their professors and support staff and people like that to move out, and you can help in that way as well. So open it to seniors that way, and we could open up to
Tim,
employees.
yeah, again, we're pointing out a broader base, and I think we first really focused on, and truly, I think at this point in time, at least my leaning is more towards ownership as compared to rental. I think we're leaving kind of a ghost market out, though, in light of the economy right now. And I think there are a fair amount of people in the community that are in the range of 40, 50 years old. They have children in the community that want to remain in the community, and simply put, their earning capacity has dropped dramatically during the recession. And there's no housing stock that's smaller to downsize into to remain in the community, to keep your children in the high school. There's a wide range when we examine, and I think that's another ghost market that's out there for 3 or 4 member households. I think you'd be very surprised.
I think another thing to expand on Alderman Grumhaus's comment, that, you know, is there an opportunity to work with some of these, some of the employers in Lake Forest? Certainly we have a number of employers that are pretty good sized, you know, Fortune 500 companies. I would assume that they may be able to contribute a little more than the average bearer, I guess, in amount of money towards some of these housing developments. And can we pool our resources in that regard, where we have so much money and they have so much money that they can give to their own employees? I think it would go a long way to certainly spanning the gap, and it would also help to create where, you know, the target market of $30,000 to $40,000 can be expanded to someone who's trying to raise a family, who's making, you know, maybe in the 50 to 80 to 90, you know, plus 100,000, because quite frankly, today, you're trying to raise a family of 5 on 80, 100, you know, put them through school and all the other good things, that's a struggle. So, I think if we can look for some types of joint ventures, where, you know, they're putting their equity in and we can, you know, put our equity in, I think that'd be very helpful.
I think that's a great idea. There's a number of models like that, and I mentioned briefly that the college has a program for mortgage support. Although it's broad through the region, it's not just targeted to Lake Forest. There's another example, which is the University of Chicago, which took it upon them. I mean, they had a great stake in the Hyde Park neighborhood. They wanted to make sure employees could live in the Hyde Park neighborhood near the college, and they set up a very innovative program for mortgage support for their employees. So they're helping to effectively help with equity on the purchase of homes, as well as mortgage guarantees. So
I mean, I
there's a
don't know.
lot of options that we could be looking at. I rather than, I think we could talk all night about great ideas in affordable housing. I think the key is to make sure that we know who we're doing the affordable housing for. It's not what we're doing, because I think our job at the Housing Trust is to come back with you, to you and say, we heard who you're targeting, here's how we think we can best use the resources to do that. So it's really not about what we build, it's more about who we're targeting and make sure that we got that right. And what I'm hearing, I think I am, I don't want to speak for any of you, but I'm hearing that we started at seniors 6 or 7 years ago, and that I think are recognizing there's a little broader need, and that means that we should probably come back to you with some thoughts and ideas about how we ought to maybe look at our ordinance and use that as a framework for a policy discussion with you. That's what I'm hearing, if that's fair. Is that
that's
a
correct.
fair assessment of your? Okay. Thank you. I don't know if we, Chairman Burns, or I don't know if, I know there's perhaps people that may want to give comment on this topic in the audience, and if they do, I want to make sure they have the opportunity.
Also, before we leave here in your packet, we had a sort of sequence, if you will, tonight being the first night of the discussion on affordable housing. And I think before we leave here tonight, we want to make sure you're comfortable, because we wanted to get word out to the community. There's a lot of people that are interested in this topic, and so that they're completely aware of any future topics, particularly if we come back to you with some recommended modifications to ordinances or the housing plan specifically. There may be more and more interest as we get further down the road. So before we leave the subject, we just want to make sure that you're good or not good with this, because that's what we will send out to, I think we have over 800 plus people on the interested mailer list on this subject.
And again, this discussion, as you can see up there as a schedule, this discussion is not intended to be a discussion about an individual project that happens to be in the pipeline. I think that we just want, I think the Housing Trust really does want to get clarity about what you think and what you feel about this topic. And then it's our job, it's beholden on us to come back to you with some recommendations on how we might want to focus on that, if that's a fair way to go about it here. But we do have, the only reason that project is up on the schedule, I think from Bob's standpoint, we do have, that's been kind of sitting around for a long time. I might say for over a year it's been sitting around, and I think it's time to one way or the other, make a decision on it. And I think rather than make a decision on it based on maybe not all the facts, we thought we would start a discussion around some policy issues, make sure we're in sync, and then decide where we go from there. So I don't want to pre-approve or pre-disapprove of any project that we might be considering. We want to really get in sync with the council here and make sure we are.
Would you be getting involved in, once you determine exactly who you're designing the housing for, guiding the developer into a house that would be for a senior or a small family, telling them how many bedrooms? Is that part of what you'd be doing, or?
At the end of the day, yeah. I mean, I think that this community would really want us to be thoughtful at that level. I do believe that that's what we would demand, and I think, as a premise, any affordable housing project, we've always, they would go through the normal process of approval of any project in town. They don't get an exemption, for example, and so I wouldn't suggest that we foreclose the, looking at, certainly in the projects that we've looked at to date, we look at, how many bedrooms are in them, are they accessible units, are they, how many garage spaces, how much open space is there? Those are all topics that are pretty critically important. I think any development that would occur in town would demand that same level of
We don't
review.
currently have a board or commission that would dictate number of bedrooms in a house though, right?
No, not that I'm aware of. So,
Okay.
so that would be more the housing trust, and we've certainly, had input from experts on topics and real estate experts on where need is. And frankly, one of the reasons that a project in the pipeline is rental is because we heard from all kinds of people that there's not rental in Lake Forest.
Yeah.
And so that was.
May I just clarify one point that's particularly up there that I would like the council to weigh in, just so staff's clear, is my understanding, unless Kathy tells me otherwise, is that the Settlers Green petition is ready now after a lot of due diligence to go back before the Plan Commission is tentatively scheduled for that September date up there. But I think it was reported at the last council meeting that the term sheet committee has completed its work and needs to give a report back to the council as well. And it's almost a chicken and egg issue, which is, does the term sheet committee make its report first before the Plan Commission, or vice versa? Because it could have an impact on the petition. And so I just throw that out there, and I know that the term sheet committee talked about this at some length at their meeting as well. And so I think it's important, particularly if the Plan Commission is to go forward, that they are aware of the pending report from the term sheet committee.
I'll give my opinion, and I think that the term sheet should be reviewed before it goes to the Plan Commission, because I don't know how you can really separate the financial aspects of that project, for one, when you're looking at it, and two, it took us a long time to get through that term sheet. It's a very complicated project, the way it's set up, and it's something that we have never done before. We have never taken on or looked at these federal tax credits in the way that that's structured. It's foreign to us, and I think it took us a long time to get our arms around it, and I think it'd make a lot of sense to get that out into the public before you bring that back to the Plan Commission.
And
Why don't we make that decision on the next discussion on the 7th?
It's certainly ready to go on the September 7th meeting. We could post it on the city's internet or on our website, so it's available to anybody who is interested in seeing it. I think the only cautionary note I would make, and we did talk about this at the meeting, is that some people would say we're putting the cart before the horse, and that the council is reviewing the financial terms, if you will, of a deal before it has actually gone before a board or commission. So, I think quite candidly, I think you're going to be criticized whichever way you go. But I just think that for purposes of full disclosure, we want to put that out there and have people say, yep, we acknowledge that was an issue, but we still felt that this was the best way to go.
To be honest, we put the cart before the horse when we filed for the project in the first place. So, I mean, we're kind of backstepping now to trying to fill in the pieces. So I think you need to get that information out to the public.
Okay, so we'll modify this accordingly to show that coming at the September 7th meeting then. Because and the members of the committee can correct me, I think the work is done and the document's ready for distribution at any time.
You should, Tom.
Yeah, no, I think if anybody does want to make comment, they're certainly more than welcome to come up. Yes? You know the procedure over to the podium, name and address?
Yes, yes, I do. Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Kitty Cole, and I live at 340 Bluffs Edge Drive in Lake Forest in the First Ward. And I am speaking on behalf of the League of Women Voters, Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, and I'm making a statement from them, and also stand behind people who are here supporting the development of affordable housing in Lake Forest. You want to stand up, everybody? No. They all have bad knees, too. So there are many constituents who care about this issue. The League of Women Voters is a pioneer in supporting increasing affordable housing in our communities. Years ago, Lake Forest League members worked with Lake Forest city officials on the plan for our senior affordable housing. A few years later, the League was pleased when the city realized the need for and the advantages of affordable housing for younger members of the community. The League of Women Voters has worked with many other regional housing and planning organizations, such as Chicago Metropolitan 2020, which deal with affordable housing need in Lake County. They, as we, recognize the importance of expanding the supply of affordable housing in our localities. Matching job opportunities with housing opportunities serves everyone. Traffic, air pollution, and the need for road construction are reduced when people can live near where they work. Without affordable housing, local businesses have difficulty finding and retaining entry-level employees. The League of Women Voters, Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, urges the city of Lake Forest to keep its present policy of developing affordable housing both for seniors and for other community members as needed. It is badly needed, and I was very happy to hear the tone of this discussion tonight.
Thank you.
Somebody in the back or square? Oh.
Good evening. My name is Matt Koshman. I'm one of the vice presidents at Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital at 660 Northwest Moreland Road. Just wanted to thank the mayor and the council for continuing this discussion. As an employer in Lake Forest, it's important to us that we have good access to housing for our employees. From a safety perspective, we need to be able to have our staff respond in a timely fashion as we have emergencies for our residents. And being able to continue this discussion and continue to look for opportunities to have our employees be able to be closer to where they work helps us to be able to respond to the needs of our residents. So thank you for your discussion tonight.
Mr. Pasquesi, nice to see you this evening.
Poor Bob. Thanks for letting me talk. I'm here for one thing. I've heard about these surveys that have been made, and I'd like to see a survey done with the police, fire, and the hospital and the college workers as to how many of those would want to move into Lake Forest. I don't think you're going to have many of them coming in here. First of all, if they can't afford the town, how are they going to shop here? We got 2 grocery stores now. You know what it is to get in there and start shopping. You better be able to afford that too. I think that we're putting the horse ahead of the cart. We've got to do something. The college needs housing for they've got plenty of room down there. The hospital has plenty of room. They can build dorms over there for their housing, for their employees. I'm not against senior housing, but you got to remember what you're doing to some of these people that are moving in here. This is not like moving into Highwood. You know, when they get here, how do they afford to stay? That's another thing you got to link, I think.
I hear there's a really reasonable lunch spot in town, though, where they can go.
There you go.
I hear the same thing.
They're cutting their prices.
Busier never. Thank you, Mr. Pasquesi. Any other, Mike?
You know, that lunch spot is starting to price a lot of people out of the market. I'm Michael Burns, I'm chairman of the Housing Trust, and I just wanted to say real quickly, thanks for your input tonight. You know, welcome to our world. There's a lot of really complicated issues that we're trying to deal with and try to provide the policies and a product that really addresses the needs of the community. So we really do appreciate your needs. I think two things that I'd like you to take away from this. One is that there has been a long history in Lake Forest that we've lost of affordable housing, and two, we have a tremendous need in the community, both on a senior and a non-senior basis. So again, the input was really, really important to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I know that was all a long discussion, and I appreciate it. And on behalf of the Housing Trust, we appreciate your input, and we'll come back to you to try and make sure that we are consistent with what you want us to do.
Well done.
Okay?
Thank you,
So
Alderman
thank you.
Morsch. That was,
Sorry for the long report.
that was very, very good report.
So if I can, I'll go to my next item, which is the Laurel and Western Avenue Redevelopment Committee. I don't have a report for that.
Very good.
Okay?
Alderman Hanrahan was about to hit you with something again.
I realize that. I've been in a hitting mood up here before too, so I know how it feels like. So that's why please forgive me your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Morsch, for two very good reports. Our next is Legal Committee.
Legal Committee is not met, so there is no report.
Very good. Our next is Post Office Reuse Planning Team, Alderman Novit.
And it's going to be a very quick report. U.S. Postal Service is moving in a fashion that is probably like the U.S. Postal Service. It's moving along, but not at a rapid pace. The Postal Service has decided to reappraise the post office building. They want to revisit that to see if they do have a commitment to actually market the property. They're committed to sell the Lake Forest, but it's a question of, do they want to sell? We'll find out. Maybe within your term, but that's.
Doesn't sound like it's within mine.
Sounds like it's in about one topic, money.
But there is activity, but that's it. And I have nothing else to report. With senior resource, we did meet on, I believe it was the 6th. Unfortunately, it was August. We didn't have a quorum, but there was a discussion on budget. And the Senior Resource Committee is very sensitive towards budget issues right now, and it appears to be very healthy. And that's really all I have to say.
Good to hear. Thank you. Public Works Committee, Alderman Looby.
Public Works, Bob Kiley already gave most of it for Western Avenue. They are, though, cutting the crosswalks in as we speak, and that will be a disruption to traffic at the intersections for the next couple of days. Hopefully it'll go quick. Tomorrow they should have the stripes down the center of the street so people realize that it is two-way now. They've been a little confused over the last couple of days. Other things to quickly report on, though, is that the Everett School should be completed tomorrow on their paving, and the Old Elm Road water main is halfway finished, so that construction's well underway and moving ahead. And for all those who travel west, the Route 60 bridge is approximately 1/2 complete. The deck coating on the north side will be placed in the next week, and then once that's cured, they're going to start on the other side. There is a lot of confusion at the recycling center, and even though they're not supposed to turn directly certain directions out of there, there's people driving all over on Saturdays and Sundays. So just want to warn you to be very careful in that area driving through there. They're not seeing the do not turn certain direction signs at all. So that's it, and we're moving ahead. Hopefully the construction season will be over in Lake Forest before the rest of the world ends theirs.
Do you think we got that stoplight close enough to your store?
I think it's a little excessive. Personally, I think the engineering on the project was terrible. There's a street light in the middle of the sidewalk by Price Insurance next to a tree, so the sidewalk plow can't get through there either. But they have a lot of lights, and the one facing the railroad bridge really doesn't do much good either, so they'll have to make some changes on that way they do.
The other thing that sort of stuck out, the 2 benches that we have on Deer Path.
That's for the bus stop coming.
No, just
Joking.
That at least gives some logic.
Yeah.
I mean, as one of my children said, so what's that? So we can sit at the corner and watch all the cars stop
Yeah.
at the stop sign? I mean,
It seems to be when you really look at the way that the engineering did it, and I will say the contractor did a great job. They made a lot of changes as he went to correct errors that were in there, but they drew up a plan without ever looking what the buildings are along the street. Because they've got, the crosswalk out and they have the planter directly in front of the door, and instead of the sidewalk going in, there's a lot of little things that are there. So I would have to say the engineering work, they never came out to visit, but we're almost done, and I think we'll be correcting a few things at some point.
okay.
Thank you, Alderman Looby. Our next one is the Transportation Safety Enhancement Committee, and the only report on that is that I believe our next meeting is next Monday, August 23rd, 9 a.m. here at the council chamber meetings next door. So that,
Mr. Mayor, did you want to just mention too, the letter that went out with respect to the underpass over at West, in an attempt to try and get the funding?
yes, there were two, well, we're gonna look at two of those coming up here, right? On the agenda, or is that
Well, the one is, the other was just an application for, this was for the East Station, but there was also an application that said if the feds came up with $2.4 million, that we would come up with $600,000 for the underpass of West.
On the
Lake
west,
Forest.
on the
Yeah.
west side, I think we wanted 680,000 or something
Right.
for the, yeah, we did receive a letter from Metra, and they're asking us to contribute about 600 and some thousand dollars to do the underpass work for the west side train station. So that's something that we'll have to try to continue to negotiate or see if there's funds available, because I know we've been working with Susan Garrett to see if we can get some state money. We did have some funds originally.
Right,
Obviously
federal
not
dollars.
everything that we're looking for.
right,
Where at Everett?
No, this is at the west side.
yeah.
Right, at the
Settlers
Everett
Square.
Station.
Yeah.
Pedestrian underpass?
Pen-
Oh,
Pedestrian
right.
underpass, yes.
And then we can put the cable through there too.
So, any other
That's expensive.
comments by council members?
I have one. I was contacted as an alderman a couple of weeks ago by the New York Times, and I was misquoted, and I would like to clear that up if I could.
Sure.
I was quoted in the newspaper identifying that a house in Lake Forest, the Noble Judah House, was sold on short sale, or is listed at a price which would be a short sale. Not only do I not know what the mortgage balance is on that house, but I didn't know what that phrase meant with respect to real estate and didn't say that. So I'd like to, I don't know how to respond to that. I've never been quoted by a national newspaper. I don't know what to do about it if I should. I've contacted the owner, who's an acquaintance of mine, and I left him a message saying that I would do whatever he thought was necessary, but I thought that it was irresponsible of them to put that in, and they're not my words. It wasn't my insinuation.
I think you should write them a letter saying that you were misquoted and that
Write them a letter and-
they should put that in corrections, which they'll bury someplace.
Which they'll bury someplace.
So if you don't read the New York Times, you will be uninformed. If you do read it, you will be misinformed.
Okay, well, I was, it was a very short piece, but it was.
Spoken like a true patriot.
I was on the phone with the guy for 45 seconds and got off the phone, so you had a good quote there, but.
My only recommendation is that was 45 seconds too long.
Yeah, so.
From
I'd
someone
also
who's
like
been in
to-
the public press his whole life,
That's a first for me.
we
so.
can do media
Just
training for
transfer
you at
those
the next
calls.
meeting.
Right, well, I actually was in the process of it and just.
Click.
Well, in fact, I know when I was on the council, we did media training
Yeah.
at one point in time, and I think we will do that again, probably coming up next
Probably
spring.
not a bad idea. It's
it.
not a bad idea to kind of do that every once in a
Well,
while.
next spring, I think we have 4 new aldermen, and so it definitely will be on our docket.
In the meantime, I'll transfer quicker.
Appreciate your comments.
I'd also like to recognize and pass on sympathy to the Tui family, our neighbor across the street who lost their 15-year-old on Saturday. And I'd just like to recognize that. They're a good family.
Very, very sad to report.
Very sad to report.
Thank you for your comments. Our next item on the agenda this evening is opportunity for public to address the city council on non-agenda items. Do we have anyone from the public who'd like to speak this evening? No, hearing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. We have 6 items on the consent agenda this evening. I will read the 6 items, and then if the council so chooses, it can go back and revisit any one of those or take them all together. Number 1 is approval of the minutes from the July 19, 2010 regular meeting. Number 2 is approval of authorizes invoices and payrolls. Number 3 is authorization of treasurer's warrants to meet expenses of August 2010. Number 4 is a request for Metro's financial assistance for the rehabilitation of the CBD train station. Number 5 is consideration of a resolution authorizing the execution of a grant application between the city and IDOT for funding of the renovation of the CBD train station. And number 6 is approving an easement agreement with Metro for the city's schools fiber network project. Any questions, comments in any one of those or all of
I
those
have
6?
2 quick questions on 4 and 5, and then I'd like to discuss 6. On 4 and 5, why do we need to approve this? When we go for grants and other stuff, usually we're not involved in it. So is there something specific here that requires us to?
Not technically or legally. I think we just wanted to make sure, since we were unsuccessful in the previous 2 ITEPs, that it was a formal action and we could show it in the minutes and part of our submittal.
Okay,
I'd say that's a good reason,
okay, that's good.
because they respond to that a little bit more.
And then 6, I don't know if you want to go in details now or do the rest of the consent agenda and then maybe come back to this one.
We could certainly do that if that's the pleasure of the council.
Well, I'd make a motion to approve the consent agenda less item 6, which we'll deal with subsequently.
Second.
Alderman Grumhaus.
Aye.
Alderman Novit.
Aye.
Alderman Whitman.
Aye.
Alderman Moore.
Aye.
Alderman Morsch.
Aye.
Alderman Hanrahan.
Aye.
Alderman Looby.
Aye.
Alderman Palmer.
Aye.
8 yeas, no nays, the motion carries.
Thank you, Beth. Then we'll go back and revisit item number 6.
Is that because, David, you saw Harry walk in and wanted to make sure he had an opportunity to speak?
Since he's retired,
Since he's retiring, I mean, he hasn't even told us really, so he should, at a minimum.
I guess
Baffled?
I've read through this and I probably need some more explanation on it, but a couple things that pop into my head is, one is, I'm assuming we didn't put this in the original budget, which is why you're coming back to us. Number 2 is, we seem to cross Metro's tracks about 17 times in our fiber network. Why on this one cross do we have to pay them $80,000? So those are my 2 first questions.
Okay. Well, actually, let me answer your first question first. The reason it's before you is because it exceeds my authority, and this was not in the original budget contract, so the council does need to authorize it. Second, you are correct. There seems to be a lot of other easements that are out there that the city has had historically, either under railroad tracks, under 60, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, this is a new location or a new easement and does require boring under, bless you, under the tracks right at Old Mill there. In this also, we tried, believe it or not, and I think it was written up in the memo, about 4 different options for overcoming this. And the reality is that this is land lease held by a trust that controls the right-of-ways for the railroad. And they basically say, pay us or you don't need the easement.
There's one other wrinkle that I should add, is that this is limited only to, the payment requirement is limited to fiber optics. At the time that the Northwestern filed for bankruptcy, one of the things that happened was their assets were divvied up. One of the assets was for fiber optic cables. It was focusing primarily on private sector fiber optic cables, but the rights were simply as fiber optic cable. Because ours is a fiber optic cable, if you notice, the lion's share of that is going to, what's the name of them?
CMC.
Yeah, CMC. That's the upshot of it, is that when the original asset transfers were done, the fiber optic cables was carved out of those asset transfers because that was seen as a future opportunity for revenue. And the arrangement that CMC has in their documents with Metra is that they can get whatever they can, and they would split it 2/3, 1/3 with Metra. So Metra really doesn't have any control over that. It's really more a matter of CMC with their rights under the original bankruptcy from some years back.
Do we have the map that's in here? Can we put it up on the screen? Do we have it?
I can confirm that about CMC because I used to work on something associated with CMC. Very interesting entity that really simply had all these rights.
Yep.
And did we just
Yeah,
assume when we planned this all out and that we weren't gonna have, that we could do this for free?
I think that was the assumption, that we could get it at a nominal price, that they would work with us. We were not aware of the trust at that time when we originally did it. And that's why also early on, we looked at 3 or 4 different options. We thought that the Commonwealth Edison option, going actually over the tracks, since they have wires that go over there, also would be an option, but they basically said, we'll be happy to put you on our poles as soon as you get an easement from Metra. And so we took a couple of different tacks, even went the political route, and unfortunately, it just got down to a point where either our only option was to go the wireless option or to pay the fee, and that was the long-term desired option.
Can you show me where this is on here?
Right.
Little down, keep going.
Keep going.
Keep going.
Yeah, here I've got,
There it is,
There it is.
right there.
Okay. So at the fire station there, do we not cross?
No,
up at.
it's on the west side.
No,
So the only place we cross over the rail line here is through the Abbott conduit over on 60.
on 60. Yeah, because the other line comes down the west side of the railroad tracks. And actually, one of the things that we were thinking about is, we were talking earlier this evening, if we were able to get the pedestrian underpass underneath that, could we somehow work that into it? But I'd love to be able to sit here and say we could sneak that in, but I think they would be smarter than that.
I hate to see what they're gonna charge us for the underpass.
Well, fortunately, that's one that they are primary on, and they want to see it, and so they probably will do an internal transfer of one type or another within their own ranks. We'll just get wrapped into the cost of the overall project.
And it won't be fiber optic.
Right. And that, I think Vic raises a good point, is if we were putting in a water main, or we were putting in a sanitary sewer line, that under Illinois law, we have the right to do that right now without paying for that. But because this is fiber optic, we fall into a different category, unfortunately.
This, for the trade-off with the advertising, I think that Metro's asking for it, what's the duration of time that they're looking for that?
Forever? Yeah, once we would give them the right, then they could put up advertising in perpetuity.
If you look at the Fort Sheridan station.
Or Highland Park.
You'll see the pole signs that are up there. That's what they, I think, are looking for as their contribution.
Okay.
And we can't run the redundancy back through the Abbott conduit? Just loop it all the way
Well,
back?
it'll be in one place then.
Yeah, and it's not redundant.
Defeating the purpose.
Well, but you have 2 different wires, no?
It's one.
One explosion.
Bob, do we have any money within the TIF that would work for this?
We do. Fortunately, we do have plenty of money because the original design that we had for the streetscape improvements, IDOT kiboshed some aspects of it. So I think we ended up having about $250,000 more than we had originally planned. So the dollars are there.
Okay. It should make you feel a little better.
Yeah, I mean, it's 5% of the project cost, right? Something like that. What was the total project in this, 2 million? 3 million? What was it?
2.5.
2.5.
I mean, you know, it's unfortunately, but it's true, so. I'd recommend.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. I recommend approval of this.
I'll second
And,
that.
and we think the wireless is that, it doesn't work?
Well, if you want, we could have people come speak to that. Not only is it not as reliable, but you have certain costs associated with that over a period of time.
But this is for redundancy, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so if the wire gets cut, we lose communication with,
The fire station. And that's part of the reason why.
well, but it's redundancy, we don't lose communication, right?
Well, we will if the main.
You will,
Eventually,
because
we'll be relying
everything's
more on
being tied
fiber.
into the
We need
fiber
it to
optic.
come the second way.
Yeah, if you want specifics, both fire chief and police chief are here, can tell you exactly. And that's where unfortunately, they have us over a barrel, because this is one of our most critical sites, as our emergency operations center, and part of the reason that we built and designed redundancy into the system.
We had that discussion already, David, when we approved the
just can't-
project.
I know, I just can't believe we missed this.
I know it's painful, but.
Yeah.
Well, I can see how we missed it. I mean, finding that easement and the details on that with a third party that owns and controls it is not to be known even on a detailed engineering drawing until you're into the project and realize where you are. And you're
I
right.
think if we'd known of it, we still would have said, okay,
Yeah.
I mean, it's embarrassing now and it's annoying, but we wanted to pass the project and it's.
Well, I think we would have gone and negotiated it before we built the entire fiber network and got thing right here and had to make a decision on it.
Right.
Right? I mean, the reason they're charging us $80,000 is because they have us over the barrel, and
Well,
they
that's-
know it.
That's the standard fee, though.
Well, actually, the original fee was $180,000, and this was negotiated down from there, so. But, yes, regrettably, we think we anticipated that we could get it down further, as we've always thought in the past with respect to easements. We didn't realize that there was this other caveat or condition that was placed on for fiber optics.
All right.
Do we have a motion?
I made a motion.
Second.
This roll call vote?
Alderman Grumhaus.
Aye.
Alderman Novit.
Aye.
Alderman Whitman.
Aye.
Alderman Morsch.
Aye.
Alderman Morsch.
Aye.
Alderman Hanrahan.
Aye.
Alderman Looby.
Aye.
Alderman Palmer.
Aye.
8 yeas, no nays, the motion carries.
Thank you, Beth.
Why don't we put this on our Metro application when we ask for the grant, so that when we get turned down, we have another reason to like them.
They're only getting a third of it.
Our next item on the agenda is new business, and as discussion on zoning variations presented by our city attorney, Victor Filippini. This is for information purposes only.
Good evening, members of the council. Today, we're just going to do zoning 101 in terms of variations. So let me just get us started by saying that when we think about zoning, many people consider zoning more as a restriction on their property. In fact, what zoning is a means to protect the community. That's why we actually enact them. It's not to restrict individual property rights, but rather to protect both the public and the rights of others. And it's something that has been the basis for zoning from the get-go. You'll see that the 1926 case that's cited up there is really the grandfather nationally of zoning, and it has always been an outgrowth, say, of the nuisance law, where you want to protect people from bad outcomes of other people's use of their property. So that's where zoning came from. When we look at that, zoning is by nature and by law is to establish general regulations. When you have general regulations that are applied across all sorts of properties, each of which has different qualities, shapes, character, history in terms of their platting, you're going to find out that the general rules don't always apply with perfection. And that is why we have purposes of variations. One of the things that we try to do with the variations is to provide a little bit of flexibility. It takes the hard edge off of some of the general regulations that are in a zoning code. And it's intended to respond to unique topographical or physical features of land. Sometimes they don't exist at the time that the property is originally platted. For example, trees might be planted, and after some period of time, the trees grow. they become something that's a landmark on the property or something that's of great amenity. And in order to protect that and still allow people to develop their property, the variations sometimes come into play. The relief from the zoning is really to avoid having the zoning have an unreasonable impact on someone's development rights. So that's why they're there. Now, whether one looks at statutory law, case law, or even local ordinances, you're going to see that there are some elemental aspects of zoning, of variations that must exist before one can get a grant of variation. And you'll see in the slide, the italicized language really points out what has been the most common aspect of a variation. It must involve either a practical difficulty or particular hardship. That's what's in the statutory language. You'll see that the same language is included in the character of the case law, which is, again, focusing on the practical difficulty or particular hardship. One of the things that the cases have also done is to make sure that when you're looking at a variation, it is not intended to be a rezoning. It is intended to be the little tweaks to an ordinance in order to allow someone to, again, avoid some of the hard edges of the zoning code. In Lake Forest, we have the same basic standard, and you'll see that one of the other things that we've added in our own zoning code is that it's not intended to change anything that would be inharmonious with our general purposes and character of the ordinance. So you'll see that there's a bit of progression from the basic statute as well as to how the courts have looked at it, and then what we in Lake Forest have done. There's also something more in the code. We've actually established some particular standards in addition to the general practical difficulty, particular hardship one. And in particular, we have the 4 that are listed here, that it's not intended to alter the essential character of the locality. That's not terribly different from the case law provision, that it's not intended to rework a wholesale change of the ordinance, but rather be more of a tweak. But this is also, I think, nuanced a little bit differently in that we're looking at something that's intended also to focus on whether the variation itself is going to have an impact on the locality. Another point that we point out is in the second one, and that is that it's supposed to be unique. It's not supposed to be something that everybody would need. So that's, again, one of the features in our zoning code that we focus on in terms of when we look at variations. A third one is that it's not a self-created hardship. It's not something that someone can effect and then say, oh, look, now I need a variation. So that's a third aspect that we look at in our zoning code. And then finally, our zoning code points out that variation is not intended to have other unintended impacts, such as affecting the life or air of neighboring properties or otherwise having some adverse impacts on the neighborhood or the community. When we talk about a zoning process, one of the things that you always have to look at is who's supposed to demonstrate that these standards are met. We have the practical difficulties, particular hardship standard in the 4 that we just pointed out. And under our zoning code, all of those are something that the applicant has to demonstrate in the course of seeking a variation. And in the absence of all of those standards being satisfied, a variation ought not be granted. Now, one other thing that we want to look at is what is our zoning structure? We have the standards, but we also have a procedure that goes along with that. We actually have a 3-part review here in Lake Forest. The first part, as the code points out, is that it's the zoning administrator that's supposed to be doing the initial review. That's our city staff. And they make the review of the application. They offer their comments to the zoning board of appeals and the city council. Theirs is a non-binding review, but it's something that is a first cut on any kind of zoning variation application. We have that same thing when they're looking at other types of variation and, other types of zoning relief as well. Second step is our zoning board of appeals. The zoning board of appeals has the obligation to conduct a public hearing, make a non-binding recommendation to the city council. And again, in doing that, they too are to review this in the context of the same standards that we've mentioned before. And you are the final step of the process. The buck does stop there. And as far as that goes, you have several different options that you can do when a variation comes before you. You have an ordinance that's usually before you to approve it, if that was the recommendation of the Zoning Board of Appeals, or you have action to disapprove it. One of the things that you'll note is that if you get a negative recommendation from the Zoning Board of Appeals, it takes a 2/3 vote from the City Council to actually overturn that decision. There's also the opportunity for the City Council to approve it with conditions, whether those conditions were recommended or not, to deny it, or to remand it back to the Zoning Board of Appeals if there's a particular direction that you want to give them for further consideration. Now, the practical difficulty and particular hardship standard is a very fact-sensitive one. And as a result, it's often shades of gray. It's not black and white. As a result, you also find that the courts have not really offered a great deal of detailed description of what is a practical difficulty or a particular hardship. The one perhaps clearest judicial discussion about this actually happened in a case from about 40 years ago to our neighbor to the south at Highland Park. And in that case, a resident was seeking a variation in order to enlarge their home, contrary to what the general zoning standards were, and they sought the variation. In reviewing this, what the court actually said is that they will not ordinarily affirm an area variance if it's granted solely to relieve a problem which is personal to the owner, as opposed to one which is especially affecting the lot in question. Again, that goes back to the point that this is intended to be something that is site-specific. The law in Illinois requires more than a showing of natural growth of a family and personal inconvenience within the definition of practical difficulties or particular hardship justifying variations from the terms of the zoning requirements. Again, that's one of the few detailed explanations that a court has given, other than one which was very specific to the facts in a case. Now, when a variation is difficult to justify but some relief seems necessary, the City Council is not without options. Those options include amending the zoning code. If we find out that the same type of variation comes back over and over and over again, that might be a clue that we need to re-examine our zoning regulations and perhaps change them. There may be an area of town that has a certain type of variation or a certain character of variations that come back, and sometimes that's a reason to look at whether we need to modify the zoning district. We may also want to look at the types of standards that we have, or even the types of variations we allow. Currently, our code doesn't have any restrictions on what someone can ask for in context of a variation. Many communities do have that. They may have percentage limitations, or they may identify the types of variations that are or are not permitted. That's not something that we currently have in our code, but those are options available. So in terms, again, of what all this is about, the variation is to try to make an ordinance, a general set of ordinance regulations, have a better fit for individual lots. The practical difficulties, particular hardship standard is one which is not only common, but one which is dictated by statute and reflected continuously in the case law on this. And the variations are intended for unique circumstances. They're not intended to be common ways of accomplishing something. They're intended also to make sure that they maintain the essential character of the town and not to undermine the general purposes of the ordinances. So there in short order is 101, and I think I managed to do it in a relatively short period of time. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to try to address them. Otherwise, I will go back to my seat.
I have a definition question, and it came up when I was on HPC. The definition of economic hardship with respect to historic preservation was determined to be that when it had to do with Barrett, that it only existed if the zoning, in this case the zoning, changed after the person had owned the property. And this is not called economic hardship, this is called particular hardship. Is there a definition for particular hardship or particular difficulty? Because there was debate among the word hardship. Hardship couldn't occur if the zoning hadn't changed while you were the owner of the property. It could only occur in HPC if zoning had changed.
Yes, the economic hardship definition in the HPC ordinance was actually twofold. One of which you mentioned. The other one is simply that someone can't use a piece of property economically. In other words, it becomes an effective regulatory taking. That's a safety valve in our historic preservation ordinance. The particular difficulty, practical difficulty, particular hardship standard is not defined. You have it in the statute as that. And as I say, the case law, for the most part, has looked at it in an individual case. They'll look at the facts of a certain case and say, it was found to be, and we agree or we don't agree. I think one of the few articulated standards is the one that I had on the slide earlier, as to, and that was more a matter of what's not, rather than what is. But I think that what you'll see, and there are some commentators that have looked at this from a national perspective, and what has been a fairly common guidepost for variations generally is still the practical difficulty, particular hardship standard. And in most states, and again in Illinois, one looks at it in terms of conditions on the property, not conditions unrelated to the property, but more related to perhaps a particular occupant or a particular set of circumstances. It really, does it affect, is the property the thing that's affecting the need for the variation as to other circumstances?
Any questions for Vic?
Yeah, Vic, and just to clarify, with the 4-point analysis that zoning petitions really undergo in Lake Forest, the second was unique condition to the property. In the area I live in a smaller home, and with the zoning that's applicable to my home, you couldn't possibly construct a home on that lot at this point. Is the zoning overlay the second part for analysis, or is it the third? Is it condition unique or hardship?
I think when you look at the zoning, when you look at the pre-existing homes, or the homes that came on before a particular zoning regulation was in play, that's really the third standard. And that is that you didn't create the hardship, it was sort of thrust upon you. And I think in terms of the uniqueness, it's not necessarily unique among all of the properties, but it's something unique about your particular property. It may be that a change in the regulations may affect all homes, but there may be something on your property in particular, maybe the pre-existing footprint of the home that then is affected in particular because of the zoning change.
Okay.
Vic, where there's an Illinois statute, which there is, that uses the phrase practical difficulties or particular hardship, but we're a home rule community, can we change our ordinance and forget half of that or redefine that, or are we ultimately still subject to that duality test of practical difficulties of particular hardship?
We certainly have the ability as a home rule community to change that. And in fact, there are some home rule communities that have identified certain types of variations that require a lesser standard. I'm not aware of any community that has completely stepped away from those two steps or those two tests, but there have been some communities that have said for this type of variation or that type of variation, we're only going to require, and then they set out the standards that they choose.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Vic?
I guess, when we have these homes that have been, that were pre-existing homes that the zoning has been laid over, whether it's it's turned over, any updating on the home is gonna violate the zoning, correct?
Many, I won't say everyone will, but many of them will. It depends on what the nature of it is. For example, if we just simply are reducing the side yards, increasing the side yards so that the existing home may now become non-conforming, there may still be an addition that is otherwise conforming, and they may just go up or they may just go back and stay within it. But I think we've seen plenty of instances where, because of changes in zoning over time, there's a common impact on the houses in a neighborhood.
Okay. Because obviously we want to stay true to the code. On the other hand, we also have to encourage these houses to be modernized. And so, you know, balancing that, I think, is one of the questions.
Yeah, no, and I think that's been the challenge. And I think when we've looked at variations throughout the town for some of these homes that have been impacted by historic zoning changes, we've usually looked at things such as, is the proposed addition increasing the amount of the variation? Is it having a bigger impact on a neighboring property? Is it going to affect the access to the property? Does it have an impact on larger trees in the area? I mean, I think that the zoning board has fairly regularly looked at those types of considerations, and those are the things that have often come to the council as part of the recommendations and reviews.
Do you know when the zoning happened for this particular area? Was there a purpose for it? Was it to protect home value, to keep home values affordable for the employees that were living in this area at the time? Was it for to protect the size of the sewer pipes? Was it to, I mean, were there particular reasons for the zoning at that time that were?
My guess is, and I may have to defer to Kathy, but I believe many of those homes predated about any of our zoning. And
Any of our what?
Any of our zoning regulations.
No, I mean when it was overlaid to that element of the community, was it because they had 6-inch water or sewer mains, or was it because?
No, I think it was the first cut at having any kind of zoning in town. And over time, as the city looked at its zoning districts, it decided to make different changes to the district. Now, sometimes they may have been looking at an area of town which was the predominant neighborhood in that district, and it had some unintended consequences for other areas. I think that's one of the things that you always find with any kind of general regulation, that if you're looking at it as a class of homes that may be impacted by it, it's a good answer, but it may have an unintended impact on a smaller class within that. So I don't know if there's any particular
Infrastructure needs or anything like that?
You know, again, I think that we had our first zoning in 1926. So, you know, many of these homes had already existed. I'm sorry?
You weren't around that time?
I was, but I was a little younger, and, you know, my memory fades after
You
time.
give us such wisdom. I just assumed you were.
You're still billing, right?
It was pre-built.
Yeah, pre-billing.
Pre-billing.
Touche. So I don't remember now if there's even a pending question, but,
Sorry, get a little punchy.
anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Vic. Our next item on the agenda this evening is old business, which is a consideration of a report and recommendation from the Zoning Board of Appeals in support of variances from the maximum lot coverage requirements and various zoning setback requirements to allow construction of an addition, a replacement garage, and a replacement front porch at 144 East Westminster. This is first reading and, if desired by City Council, final approval, presented by Director of Community Development, Kathy Cerniak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This matter is back before you as a continued item. You did hear a presentation at your last meeting, requested some additional information, and you just received the zoning variance 101 from the city attorney. Just to refresh everyone's memory, and for those who may not have heard the last presentation, this property is located near the Central Business District on the north side of Westminster, a few lots to the west of Oakwood. This matter was before the zoning board in May and July of this year. The zoning board had an extensive discussion of this petition, and this comes to you with a recommendation in support of the requested zoning variances from the zoning board with a vote of 5-1.
Just to review the variances that are requested, there is a request for a variance from the lot coverage. Lot coverage, and this is not specific to each zoning district, this is for all properties. Lot coverage maximum permitted in the code is 30%. That is the coverage of structures only. In this case, there is a variance requested of 6.7% to allow an addition to the home of 290 square feet, which would be over the allowable 30% coverage. The addition also carries with it requests for side yard variances. The existing house is non-conforming because this house was constructed prior to 1923 when the first zoning was applied in Lake Forest. The required setbacks in the R2 zoning district are 12 feet. On the east side of the house, the proposed addition is pulled further away from the property line than the existing house. For the addition, a variance of 8.5 feet is requested. On the west side, the proposed addition is approximately, encroaches to the same extent of the existing house, and a request of 4.25 feet is requested. Variances would also be required for the garage and front porch. However, those structures already exist, and the variances would simply allow reconstruction of the garage, which would be removed to allow construction of the addition to the house, and reconstruction of the porch on those same footprints. So there's no increase in the variances that would be requested. For information, the Building Review Board also saw this petition and did recommend or did approve building scale variance of 15%. In your packet, on page 68, there's detailed findings provided by the Zoning Board of Appeals. And you also have in your packet attached to the ordinance just about the same page, I believe it's page 70, you have the detailed plan showing the proposed addition. As the city attorney outlined, when presented with a request with a recommendation from the zoning board, the city council can choose to support that recommendation, to remand the petition if you find that there is a need for some additional consideration by the zoning board, or to overturn that recommendation. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Kathy, I have a few questions. Since our last meeting, has anything changed in terms of the variances and what was brought to us last time?
No, this is
exactly
the
the same
petition
thing
is
that-
recommended by the zoning board.
Also, another question I have for you, in the original petition in front of the ZBA, when they, after a couple of times that obviously went through, and then the 5-to-1 vote, what was the staff's recommendation to the various variances at that time in terms of recommendation to the ZBA board?
The staff recommendation to the zoning board was to deny this request. That recommendation was based on consideration of the number of variances that were requested, consideration of other variances in this neighborhood. This neighborhood has had a number of homes with variances, but as we studied those variances, we couldn't find a situation where there were this many variances altogether. Many houses in the area have had 1 or 2 variances. A couple have had 3 variances. Many of those variances were associated with garages, construction of a second floor over a first floor, or bump out of a bay window or a porch. certainly any of these variances taken alone would not be, would probably have been something that staff would have supported. Of particular concern was the request for a variance from the lot coverage. We did do some review, and based on our review in the past 20 years, 4 lot coverage variances were requested. 3 of those were to allow garages on lots where garages didn't exist.
Thank you. I have other comments, but I'll wait for it.
So Kathy, if I read this correctly, there was a change of view then? You're now recommending that the council approve this?
The staff makes a non-binding recommendation to the zoning board. What is presented to the council is the recommendation of the zoning board. So the zoning board voted 5-1 to support the requested variance. That's the recommendation that comes forward. In response to Alderman Hanrahan's question, I was reviewing
I asked for the ZBA board.
the staff's recommendation to the board, so two
Right.
different recommendations.
And I think as a group, it's a troubling petition, but the hardship noted in the findings of the zoning board was, as Vic would say, a condition that was a personal hardship as compared to a hardship that exists on the land itself.
The findings, as developed by the zoning board, did speak to the needs of the family, also recognized that the existing house on the property is non-conforming, and recognized that overall non-conforming situation.
Okay. Has there been any attempt to pull back and revisit this negotiation with the owners at this point?
Normally, once a petition is acted on by the zoning board, it isn't the staff's role to do further negotiation, since this was a matter pending before the council.
If this was turned down, would the homeowner still have the ability to reapproach the city with another application for a variance?
Yes, this matter could either be remanded by the city council with direction to the zoning board, or the petitioner could come back with a different proposal and certainly resubmit to the zoning board.
Okay, so there is another opportunity potentially after this to ask for some type of variance.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
But any variance, any construction that gets done here will automatically trigger 6 variances, right?
It would depend on the scope of the project. I think it's correct to say just about any project would trigger the need for some variances, but could the project be reduced?
The existing house is already in violation of 6 non-conforming rules, right?
Well, 5, it's not over both, or land coverage at this point, I don't believe. But if they came back with an addition, I think it would be 6.
Correct. The existing house is 28% coverage.
No, they went the other way on both sides. They narrowed it on both sides.
I believe if you were going to rebuild the same house in the same footprint, it would be 5 variances.
The lot coverage.
The lot coverage definitely went up.
Yeah.
70 or 69.
Just to clarify, you are correct to say that the only requested relief that is greater than the existing conditions is the lot coverage.
Right. It's obviously up significantly, but.
Can I ask a question of Vic? Based on the review process, based on your presentation, and the slide that talked about is this a non-issue because you've practically defined the current situation in your presentation on the slide titled "The Review Process Applying the Standards." I mean, you've almost answered the question, or have you? Is there latitude in that? Because it seems to me that this is watching the meeting, the criteria for passing this were family values and good people, which didn't seem to be in the code, which is appropriate. I'm sure they are, but these are particular needs of a particular family as the petition was brought forward, and it's clearly not allowed in Highland Park. I mean, are we talking about it for nothing? Is it over? Is it?
Well, I would say certainly in one of the findings, if you look at criteria number 3, one of the findings was that the property owner's need to accommodate a growing family was part of the basis. I don't think that that's a legitimate basis for a variation. I wouldn't presume to say that absent that there would not still be some basis for it, but that's something that's not for me to decide. I think that when one looks at it, you need to look at it in terms of the request itself, not in terms of the requester.
Okay. So there might be, even though they were presented under a growing family, there might be other parts of their application that could justify the variance.
Certainly. I think that there may be conditions on the property, and again, I won't presume to make those judgments, but there may be conditions that in the wisdom of the zoning board and the city council would be seen to be meritorious for a variation. And again, I think that one of the concerns of staff may have been that the number of variations in this request was something that may take it out of character, but again, that's a judgment call, and one of the things about variation law is that it is very much fact sensitive if you look at all of the case law, and the fact finders are formally as a recommending body, the zoning board followed by the city council as the final decision maker.
David, to throw out a couple things, and I'm just going to throw these out because I have a month left in my term, but I think it has to be addressed to the letter that we received by a zoning board member, just to clarify. And being a member of the ZBA for 3 years and the Plan Commission and Parks and Rec Board, I feel that we as a council have to answer a little bit of that letter. And then these are just no comments to the petitioner, but to the person that wrote the letter. First of all, as chairman of some of these boards, we only recommend. We do not dictate policy. We do not do anything but that, and I think all of us know that on city council because most of us were on the boards. So in that letter, it kind of made it sound like we're just supposed to rubber stamp everything. That's not true. We're here to discuss it, look at it globally, look at it as a big issue, and where do we want to go in terms of some of these R1 neighborhoods that are smaller developments that are supposed to have smaller houses. And we have to look at that for the good of the community, and treat it that way. And we have to look at what the city staff recommends and weigh it from the ZBA and other parks. I know Cardi Davis is here, the chairman of the board. He works very hard. The person that wrote the letter, I've served with him on several committees. He works very hard. But sometimes we have to take a stance. We have to draw a dotted line, and we have to do what we think is right. And so to answer kind of your question is, you got to make a judgment. Is it hardship or not? I don't know. Everyone has their different definition of hardships, but we as a council have to make that decision. So I just want to kind of clear the air on that, because I got the feeling from that letter is we were doing our job, and I take offense to that.
I would deny the petition. I think that the findings were wrong in 2 out of the 4 paragraphs. They made a finding that the subject lot is unique. I don't think there's anything unique about the property. I think there was something that was unique perhaps about the family situation, but I don't think it was unique to the property. That dovetails with their finding in 3, that it's to accommodate the need, the changes to accommodate the growing family. So I don't think that there's a hardship that's caused by the zoning code. I think it's a situation that, you know, for good reasons, was something that was created by the people who were living there. Now, so I can't support this petition. I just think it is contrary to the standards we set, and I think it's contrary to the Karasik case that was cited in the presentation. You know, these are good people, and they've got a great family, and if we're going to look at amending the code and make those standards for other variations, then we can do that, but those aren't the standards we're dealing with right now. Personally, I don't think they should ever be standards, because I just don't think they have a role in zoning decisions here. We have tens of thousands of good people here who bring their families and want to enlarge them. And if we start making that a test, so we can just basically toss out the zoning code completely. So I think that I think the ZBA was wrong, and I would not support the petition.
And before public comment, truly, yeah, and I'm saying this maybe from a personal level, I went to the household on Sunday, and I did have an opportunity to speak with the petitioners, and I wanted, in all maybe well-intended way, to find another avenue that this could pass, or there'd be a hardship that I could contrive, something in good conscience that I could have beyond suiting the needs of a growing family. I couldn't. And I really want to pass this emotionally, but I can't on a zoning basis. It is what it is, especially in light of the discussion we've had earlier on affordable housing. In light of the thought that the zoning overlay was to preserve the character of the neighborhoods to have smaller housing, I can't be in support of it. I want to pass it, but I can't. The hardship just doesn't exist under the existing code. And I can't be any more honest than that.
Fair enough. Take public. Any other discussion, or we have?
Petitioner has a comment.
Do we have room for public comment, or do we have? Is that our discussion?
It's your call.
Our discussion. So if we wish to hear. This is our second time around, so it's up to council.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Come on up.
Yeah.
Thank you. Two comments. First is, I appreciate Alderman Novit stopping by, and I appreciate the work you put in. I appreciate the work the lawyer, Mr. Filippini, put in. And the primary issue here, as I see it, is in item 3 on page 68 from the ZBA. The way it's worded, it leans heavily on the family, the growing family. We didn't write this. We presented a lot of other information to the BRB and the ZBA. But at the heart of that issue, where it states practical difficulty in complying with the requirements of the zoning code, result of the zoning restrictions, and the property owner's need to accommodate a growing family. You knock that last part off. Number one, we're in the R2 zoning code, not R1. It's even worse than R1. R2 zoning code states minimum lot coverage at 20,000 square feet, not 4,000. And it also says 100-foot wide lots. I can't find anywhere in the Lake Forest zoning code where there's anything close to accommodate anything in this neighborhood. So I think, to somebody's point, the zoning codes in this neighborhood need to be thrown out and need to be rewritten to accommodate the neighborhood for 2010 not 1907 or 1926, when it was far more justified to consider this area affordable housing. This area is a very diverse area. It's not affordable housing. And I don't know if your intent is to make it affordable housing. I believe that's a very dangerous road to go down. But our intent here is to once again modernize the property. The second point I would make from the practical standpoint is that it's a bath and a half. That's the practical difficulty. To get another bath in there, you have to invest the money. There's no return on the investment in this property to renovate it in its current condition. We might as well move out, turn it into a rental, turn it into affordable housing on a rental basis. And by the way, there's at least 4 rentals in the neighborhood right now that nobody's snapping them up, okay? So I think all of this agenda tonight needs to be put into context, and it's all relative to the time we're in. A lot's changed since 1998 when we bought this house, and a lot's changed since it was built, obviously, in the early 1900s. The zoning codes don't work here, and that is the hardship. Forget the family. The zoning code is the hardship. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Ms. Cardy?
Good evening, Mayor Cowhey and Alderman. I'm Cardy Davis, Chairman of the Zoning Board. I wanted to give you a perspective on why and how we came to the conclusion that we did. First, we spent a tremendous amount of time. In the 4 years I've been on the Zoning Board, we spent more time on this petition than anything we have had in the 4 years. We spent 2 meetings, a total of over 3 hours on this. And the staff, Kathy and Megan, spent a hell of a lot more time than that. So this has been studied a lot. The final petition ended up with 2 of the original variation requests eliminated completely, 2 more that were reduced so that the encroachment was less than the current home, and there was only 1. What Vic said was true. There was only 1 that was new and different and over and above what currently exists on the home. Now, I don't know whether you understand this lot. First of all, it is R2. R2 requires a 12-foot side yard setback, 40 feet setback in the front, 35 in the rear. This lot is 36 feet wide and 120 feet long. 36 feet wide, take off 12 feet on each side, you have a 12-foot strip in the center of the lot that is buildable, a total of 540 square feet. Now, how many houses do you think could be built on 540 square feet? The issue here, the hardship, is the zoning code. There is no way that anybody that lives in an R2 district with a 36-foot lot can do anything on their home without a variation. Now, the Kiddles are trying to update their home. It's the smallest, the one that has not been updated for a long time in that community. They're just trying to bring the house up to the same level as the rest of the community. In the rear, where the addition is, the addition goes out to the same distance that the rear of all the other houses in the block are. So there's nothing really that is outstanding or stretching the limits with respect to this. Another thing that I wanted to mention, Kathy brought this up. There are many, many homes in this vicinity that have had variations approved by the ZBA and by the City Council over the years. Over the last 30 years, there have been 34 variations approved for setbacks and for lot coverage. Okay, now they didn't all have both, but they had one or the other or both. 34 that were approved by the ZBA, a whole series of ZBAs, and a whole series of city councils. Now, either they were wrong, or we are trying to make the standards and what we're doing on these things more strict today than they have been in the past. Again, the real issue is the zoning code, and that's what the hardship is. Now, obviously, you can do anything you want. I mean, we can't tell the city council what to do. We can only make a recommendation. We think this is a very reasonable recommendation. It did not come easy. It did not come without having the Kiddles back off in every single area of their original requests. So there's only one thing that they're asking for that goes beyond what the existing home is, and that is the lot coverage. And they reduced that between the first and second meeting we had with them to an additional, from an additional 406 square feet to 290 square feet. So the bottom line of this whole thing, we're talking about a lot coverage addition of 290 square feet over and above what the zoning code says it should be. Most of the homes in this area have are over the lot coverage also. Not all, but most are, and many are over a lot higher percentage than the Kiddles home is. So I just wanted to give you a slightly different perspective. I think that it would be very unfortunate if you denied this ordinance tonight. I think the best thing that you could do would be to remand it back to the ZBA with instructions for a stricter approach, if that's what your thinking is, and it sounds to me like it is, a stricter approach for us to deal with this particular issue. If you do that, we will attempt to work with the Kiddles to see if we can come up with something that will get approved and meets your new stricter guidelines. We want to be sure that we have a good meeting of the minds and a good understanding between the members of the ZBA and the City Council as to what you think can be approved in variations and what cannot be approved. My feeling and my understanding from being on the ZBA for 4 years is that there have been many, many variations approved that are not too different from this, particularly when you recognize that they are only really asking for one variation that goes above and beyond what the current house is. So let's be sure that we agree, we have a meeting of the minds as to what we're doing here, and hopefully you will remand that back to us, and we will do our damnedest to either come up with something that will work, and we're confident you will approve, or we will not recommend approval. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cardy, for your comments, and I think I could speak for everyone that we certainly respect the time and efforts of, I understand, the time and efforts of the boards and commissions and all the efforts that you put into it, and I appreciate your coming out tonight to give us guidance as well.
My name is Kevin Warnke. I live at 140 East Westminster, the neighbor on the west of the Kiddles. You can approve the petition as it is tonight, legally, and you should. Why can you? Well, actually, the city attorney, he gave a case study. Zoning law is a general law, and there are places where it doesn't fit. A 36-foot wide lot with 12-foot setbacks on its face doesn't fit. By the zoning code itself, it doesn't fit. As Kent said, it's designed for 100-foot wide minimum lots. It's zoned residential. There is no house you could put on a 12-foot wide strip. A single wide mobile home is too wide to fit on a 12-foot wide strip. The zoning code itself is the hardship, as the head of the zoning board said. Why else can you do it? Again, the city attorney said, or presented it right on his slides. One of the reasons, I think it was by law, is when the zoning code, one, it's site-specific, and that's certainly the case here because of the geometry. And two, you can give a variance when it unreasonably restricts normal use of the house. Normal use of a house includes having a third bedroom. In fact, it's sort of ironic. The Affordable Housing Survey, what did the people say? Well, it's not a house unless it has 3 bedrooms and 2 baths. So apply that to this house. It's reasonable use of the property to put a third bedroom in the house. You can approve this legally tonight. The hardship is case specific. As Ken said, it's not the family, it's the zoning code. And by your own standards of the city of Lake Forest, the only reason that would disqualify it is if, well, that zoning code was brought about by people with the interest in the house. The Kiddles didn't pass the zoning code. There is no requirement that, well, this is a hardship that existed or came into effect after they bought the house. And again, the city attorney said that. That's not a requirement by law or by the city zoning code. You can approve it. Now, why should you approve it? You know, I listened to a lot on the affordable housing. A lot of discussion about why Lake Forest wants to be good to families in general. Well, let's talk about families in particular. Your own affordable housing plan says you want to, let's see, the residents that you want to provide this to support are people and families that greatly add to the fabric of daily life in Lake Forest. That's a direct quote, including young families. Young families include growing families. That these are the people in general you say you want to support in Lake Forest. Well, you have one. You have one that lives here, pays taxes here, and has been a long-time resident. Why do you have an affordable housing plan? Because you say the city of Lake Forest desires to promote healthy, stable, and vibrant neighborhoods. We have a healthy neighborhood on Westminster. We have a vibrant neighborhood on Westminster. I wish we had a stable neighborhood on Westminster. But we don't, and the only reason we don't is that families keep having to move out of the Kiddles house because it's too small. So your own policies of why you want to have all these wonderful housing concepts, let's apply them to a family in particular that's here. You can approve this legally. You should approve this for the residents that you represent in the city of Lake Forest. Every single person that's testified publicly on this in two zoning board meetings, 1 building review board meeting, and now 2 city council meetings, every single neighbor that has stood up, any single member of the public that has stood up to testify has been in favor of this. The neighbors are in favor of it. That's why the building review board overwhelmingly voted for it. That's why the zoning board of appeals overwhelmingly voted for it. Now let's take the very first thing that our city attorney said on why zoning exists in the first place. It's not, well, it's not a hindrance to the property owner. It's to protect the city, it's to protect the neighbors, it's to protect the residents. This is good for the residents, it's good for the neighbors, that's why we're all supporting it, and it's good for the city. Ask yourself, why wouldn't we approve this for the residents of this city, this particular family, in a house that the hardship is the zoning code itself that's been there since 1926. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I know it's late, I won't take up too much of your time. My name is Jim Herring, 1420 West Fork Drive, here in Lake Forest. My background is finance, and I think that one of the things that this council should consider, and it goes towards the stricter approach if that's the direction you choose to take. I agree that I think this could be approved here today. We're talking about 290 square feet. That particular piece of lot coverage that's going to be covered up isn't going to make any difference with respect to the property itself. The reason that nothing has been done with this property is because it is 1.5 baths, and to do anything significant economically isn't feasible. To build 290 square foot addition is almost borderline not feasible. The reason that the plumbing and the electrical is original and a hazard is because people aren't going to invest that kind of money in a 1.5 bath house. What the Kiddles are trying to do is upgrade this home to the standards that they can continue to live in, and that it meets the requirements of most of the city of Lake Forest and always has. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you. First, I want to say thank you for passing the last 50 feet of the fiber optic project so we can continue on with that one. But I'm here to talk about the house. My name is Steve Goldman, and I live at 720 Oakwood, which is directly across the street from this home. I've lived here for 27 years, so I've got to know all 4 families that have lived in this house. It's been a unique house, and it's been a house with challenges, right? And so having had a rental house to the west of us, a house that nobody could build on, and we recently renovated, it's a much better situation, you have to be concerned about that. This house, if somebody were to buy it, they would not do the upgrades that were necessary to this house without getting more space in it. And I'm concerned that if that you do not allow this house to be brought up electrical, plumbing, and what I think a rather minor addition to lines up with the rest of the houses, this house will become irrelevant to the neighborhood. And thus, you'll start to have people come and go, which is the worst possible scenario for this tightly grouped area. So as a resident across the street, I would strongly suggest to you that you approve this and let this house stay relevant in today's market. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? No, then we'll bring it back to the council. Any other discussion?
I have a question for legal counsel. Is there any difference between our denying this petition and our remanding it effectively? It can be brought back to us either way, right?
If you deny it, they could come back with another application. If you remand it, theoretically, it could be another or a new permutation of this, or it could be the same application with revised findings.
You know, I have to say, I'm struggling a lot with this one. I think we all are. You know, on the one hand, I think we really have to stick by our zoning codes. And I think, you know, the point was raised that maybe past councils, or maybe even this council, you know, haven't done that as consistently as we should have. And I think that's probably a fair charge. But I think, you know, we need to protect our housing stock, and we need to protect these zoning changes from changing our houses and making them bigger and taking smaller houses out of the market. On the other hand, I don't know, and I mentioned this earlier, and I think the point was just raised, I don't know how we get houses such as this improved. Given the R2 zoning that's been overlaid, given that it's, you know, without touching it, it's way over a lot of variances. It clearly sounds and looks like it's in need of, you know, upgrades in the internal parts, electrical, that type of thing. And, you know, given the existing footprint, my guess is it's completely uneconomic to do that. And so then we do get left with houses that, you know, fall out of shape with the neighborhood and don't fit. And I don't know how we provide that incentive. And I also think that this addition, while on a percentage basis it's somewhat large, it is only 290 feet, and I don't think it really changes the character of this house. It's not taking it, you know, way up in price level. It's not moving it to sort of another, you know, pricing it out of the neighborhood. And so therefore, I, you know, can understand where the ZBA came out as they did. You know, and I think what to do with this, you know, we could remand this, but the problem is I'm not sure what the instructions are going to be. You know, if it's 100 feet over, are we going to feel any different? You know, I guess we could remand it and say you can do it, but you can't change the footprint. But, you know, I think they probably already know that. You know, I'm just not sure that there's a compromise here. You know, I think the reason, you know, a number of members of the council are against this is because it's against the zoning code. And whether it's 1 foot over or 290 feet over, I'm not sure we're going to change the principle of that. You know, I think you're sort of, I'm certainly open to discussion, but I think we're sort of left in the position you either sort of accept it, the changes that have been proposed, or you reject it because it's, does go against the zoning, and we need to take a hard line on that. I'm certainly open to any thoughts people have about if there's a compromise there, but I can't come up with it what it is.
When I looked at this, I saw, I was in the house for New Year's Eve parties with the previous owner, and they're friends of ours. This house sold for a particular price because it was unexpandable, because it was built out of, built in the code. It could not be enlarged. It was already out of compliance with the codes, and that made it affordable, and that made small families move in. And when they grew, they moved out and moved into bigger homes in Lake Forest. And when I had a discussion with Ren, the gentleman I replaced here at City Council, he made a point of this, of the few things that were important in Lake Forest. It was allowing entry-level homes, and if there's a small home on an unimprovable lot, this is exactly what that is. We heard the petitioner tried to sell the house and was unsuccessful. Unless I'm wrong, that was one of their outcomes, and they couldn't sell it. Well, there's a lot of homes that can't sell for the price they need to sell for in this town. There's a big adjustment going on. I have a difficulty with the erosion of the zoning, but I actually have a bigger problem with the sense of a right to live in a particular house, a right to if the house sells for, and let's hope it doesn't, for a fraction of what it's worth, that will allow somebody to come in and do the electrical work. This is how some of these, on HPC, some of the larger estates that came up. We had the debate come up that some of these homes were unmarketable with 7 acres of land in Lake Forest, undividable, and they had to be divided to allow more reasonable price homes in. Well, 2 years later, that house that was listed for $13 million sold for a fraction of that price, and that was the market value for that house. And there was no guarantee. There was no sort of guarantee on investment, guarantee on a right to do these things. And and I have a problem at that level as well. And I think these. I think the house was purchased fully aware that it was unexpandable because it was out of the code compliance, and I think it was and I think that controlled the value and allowed a lower purchase price at the time. It seems unfair that one family at a particular point in time would get to break that. I don't know. It's an economic inconsistency I can't quite phrase properly, but I have a hard time with. Everyone else in town would want the same break regarding their zoning issues. So I think fairness is a problem. That's what I have to say.
Any other discussion this evening?
I mean, I should probably speak since I'm in the neighborhood and I'm the alderman as well. For the last month, I've looked at this issue very carefully and considerately, and I have to say sadly, I haven't figured out a reason to approve it. I've looked for one, much like you, Kent, and you expressed your concerns. I have to echo Greg's feeling. I was extremely disappointed by the correspondence that I received from a zoning board member. It was personally accusatory. I found that offensive. I'm very sorry that that's the case. I think the issue that I have here is I think if we need to look at zoning in that neighborhood, let's look at it. I mean, I think that's a policy issue I think that the council rightly should look at. And if there's a way to look at that in a way that impacts all the neighborhood, the whole neighborhood, because this neighborhood is really I think you really have to go almost all the way to Laurel, and you've got to go all the way down to Vine at least, and you've got to go from Green Bay to Western. And you've got to look at all the residential zoning in those neighborhoods and figure it out. If it makes sense for us to look at some different zoning variations. I'm happy to do that because obviously the neighborhood's changed. It's changed a lot, so if we should look at that from a policy standpoint, I'd be very supportive of doing that. I'd be supportive of sending this back to the zoning board, but with a very clear message that says, I don't have any problem, nobody ever would suggest building on a 12-foot lot. That's not what we're here talking about. It's not at all what the issue is. I don't know why I keep hearing that as an excuse to approve this, because that's not what we're here talking about. The city council has routinely, I think, looked at variances and granted variances when they are within the existing footprint of the homes. This is significant. It is significant on only one variance. I would approve all the variances without batting an eyelash. It is on the lot coverage size. That is my feeling. It is my feeling, and apparently a zoning board member felt it so compelled that he pulled out my house and said that they wouldn't approve it for my house. Well, I don't know how I as an alderman would go to every neighbor and everybody else in the neighborhood and say, oh, by the way, we've already been told you're not going to get yours no matter what the case might be on your individual lot. I found that hard to deal with. And so as open a mind as I've had for this over the last month, and I think at the last city council meeting, I said, please come see me, talk to me, whatever I can do to help try and figure out something here. All the evidence has gone the other way on me, and so I apologize that I can't vote for this, but I can't.
Do you see a remand, do you see any reason to
The
send?
remand, I could remand it back with, as long as the lot coverage size, direct them to keep it within the footprint. Any other variances that need to be on the side lots, that's not an issue. None of that stuff is an issue. I think, I've been on council now for 5 years, and, I've seen us approve many of those if they line up with the existing lines, and even a little bit outside of those lines, where it's had to accommodate, we've accommodated doors and porches and various other things. Other people in the neighborhood, they've built on top of garages. That's what I'd have to do on my lot. I'd have to come in for a variance on my garage, because I have a huge garage, so I'm covered as well. So, but, I'd be happy to remand it, but with that one caveat, would be the way to remand it. At least that'd be my view.
My inclination is to deny it and send it back and give them a fresh sheet. They pretty much understand from our comments what's going on.
What does that do for timing for the petitioner? Does it start a 6-month process, or do they come back in a month?
I wouldn't think it starts a 6 month.
If it's remanded, it would require a new public hearing, so it'd be a public notice before the hearing. I'm guessing that would probably put it into September?
If it's remanded or if it's,
If it's remanded,
okay.
yes.
And if it's rejected?
If it's rejected, then they'll need a new application and might throw it off another cycle, I'm guessing.
New permit fees and the whole thing.
Well, what I'd recommend is if we could, if they would like to do something, I think we should. We've put them through enough meetings, it sounds like already, that we should try and expedite if they were willing to try and do something else.
Yeah, I would
If they
agree
don't
with
do
that.
it.
I agree.
We certainly shouldn't make them incur new
No,
fees.
and not incur additional fees or something. And go through it
I
again.
take it remand with directions.
Remand with directions.
Like, don't increase the footprint of the house.
Well, don't increase it, they can increase it 78 feet, but, right, they can't go over the lot coverage amount, right?
Right, the lot coverage.
Lot
amount,
coverage.
I don't think the setbacks are an issue. I don't think they ever have been, and that's why Cardy, I know how hard you work, but to give me an example of a 12-foot house, really, it's not what we're here talking about. It never would be. It never would be, and I've never had a discussion about 12-foot houses in Lake Forest. So, that's, at least in my experience, that's not how people have come forward.
I'm going to throw it just to Victor with a question, and I can't support it right now, and I prefer it be remanded. But would economic hardship for preservation of an existing house be a basis for a zoning variance?
I've not seen that as a basis for a zoning variance.
And not personal economic hardship, but just to renovate the home, that there's no it's not practical.
Well, I think that the way zoning has really looked at it is not to be price sensitive. I think that, I don't know, I don't recall who said it, but certainly there's a price, it might have been Alderman Moore, said that there's a price at which someone will make the renovations, just that, you know, whatever that price settles at is what's going to determine that. Zoning has never looked at ownership, it's never looked at personal considerations, it tries not to look at economic considerations unless the zoning makes the lot itself unusable. Clearly, the lot's been usable. It may not be usable to the standards that people are looking at today, but that also is a function of price. So I think that that's usually not where zoning weighs in. It's really only if the zoning makes a lot unusable.
But just to go on the tangent, for preservation of the current housing stock or character of the neighborhood, could that be an avenue as a city policy?
Yeah, I suppose there could be an extreme where it's possible, yes.
Okay, thank you.
It is 11 o'clock. I know we've discussed it.
I'll
I'm
make a
looking
motion
for
to remand.
Okay. With
Second.
Would that motion be to remand in consideration
back to
of
the
everything
zoning.
except, or to make sure that there's lot coverage compliance?
Correct.
We have a motion, and it's seconded. Just for clarification, Vic, since we've been through this twice, is this a voice vote or is this a roll call vote?
For the remanding to be a voice.
Okay. We have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, not that I want to keep you here longer, but maybe between now and the September 7th meeting, I've sat here and listened to a lot of the conversation, and it's clear that the issue of lot coverage is what's most troubling for the city council. And going back to, I think, something that Kathy presented, in 20-plus years, we've only had 4, 3 were for garages, and I don't know what the particulars were for the others. If it is the pleasure of the council, we could look at doing a text amendment to tighten up any potential future petition that wants to try and exceed lot coverage as well. If you would like to see us maybe put something together that you could then send to the Plan Commission for consideration, if that's what's most troubling for you.
For this parcel or?
Not this parcel, across the city is what we're saying.
Okay.
So that we don't get into this situation with other lots in the city as well. Maybe carving out garages or something, because I'm just, from the body language, I'm sensing that increasing lot coverage on lots is very troublesome for the council, but right now, there's an opportunity to do that in your code.
Bob, I don't know if this is the sense of the council. Personally, it was the extra size that just tipped it over. It was a cumulative effect that I felt. And everything was, you know, at the seams or busting seams. So it wasn't just that, you know, the lot size is always a bad thing. In this case, to me, it just really kicked it over because everything else was at the seams.
I got the sense that we're dealing with a unique neighborhood, period. And I know when I was on council, this area came up with petitions on a regular basis for side yard, rear yard. I mean, that was a very common thing. And I think, I don't know if it makes sense, but Alderman Morsch's recommendation that we may look at that area, that's something maybe staff can give us some recommendation on, because I don't know, but we have seen that many. I don't know that, Bob, that just the bulk is the one thing we're talking about. I think it's this zoning in this particular area, and I guess I don't think that at this point of hour that my mind is clear enough to tell you anymore. But I think that that's certainly the one issue that we've wrestled with. I think the petitioners wrestled with, the ZBA has wrestled with, the staff has wrestled with. So I don't think we're going to solve that portion tonight, but we at least got this off the docket and move back to ZBA, and Cardy can pick it up again. And I certainly, I think all of us are trying to come up with a good solution for the petitioner, and I think, as you can see, the struggles that we have with it as well. This is a unique problem, and our hearts out to you for your perseverance in trying to make something work as well. So I think we have a bigger issue that I think that does entertain some more thought as we go forward as well. But that's not for right now. I can tell you, we're gonna run out of steam here.
Are we all done now?
So
I have one more question, if I could. I'd just like to recognize that a visiting city official, Commissioner Mary Ann Moore from Traverse City, Michigan, my mother.
Oh, there you go.
We're both serving our first term as city
There you go.
officials, so. She
Welcome.
came over to the meeting. Thank you.
All right, having no more items for discussion,
She's staying with me, so. we're all-
entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
All in favor? Meeting is adjourned.